All right, welcome to the Smeth Den. Today we have Cakeflakez, and we're going to talk about his thesis about what would you title your thesis, Cakeflakez?
I don't know. It's mainly just it might be many theses. I don't know if I'm going to separate it and like have more like branching off because it might be too unconcise right now. But it's mainly about empathy, autism, and the cycles that play of like how people feel like masked or like they will fall back into masking, like autistic masking because of like
Right,
societal norms.
right. We had a heated conversation in a voice channel, um, and it was probably extra heated because there was like a bunch of other people jumping in and stuff. Um,
Yeah. It was an
but
unexpected conversation too.
yeah, um, I remember telling you that I thought that by your definition of autism, that everybody's autistic.
Yeah, and I might have said something like I don't know fully where autism and where it lies completely off of the definition that's already out there. Because everything is so muddy when you look into autism.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything becomes just like super abstract, and everything's changing every day when it comes to autism, especially with like uh since 10 years ago we used to think of like autistic people as like not empathetic at all. They didn't have empathy at all. And
Mm-hmm.
now new research says they are actually highly empathetic but just emotionally empathetic versus cognitive empathy.
Really? So the research says that. And by the way, okay, just as a disclaimer, someone's in chat saying fight, fight, fight. We might get there. All right, we might get
Yeah,
there.
it
But
depends.
just as a disclaimer, I'm not an expert, and neither is Cakeflakes. But we're both just interested people, and Cakeflakes seems to
Just
be
a
reading
layman.
about this stuff.
I'm a layman that's into psychology and is always
Yeah,
very into like paying attention to people or focusing on like I've always
yeah,
been very analytical of humans.
right. So another thing that you previously you accused me of having PTSD.
Yeah,
Um,
which I'm not
and,
fully sure. It's more of like a highly likely or kind of likely feeling.
okay. Do you remember why? Um, I
Yeah,
remember.
it's because
So
your inability of like saying emotions or you
yeah,
seem
right.
very stuck in logic. Yeah.
I don't think it was I'm stuck in logic, but
Yeah,
I
that's more
found it
context that
interesting.
would have to be
I
there.
found it interesting. So the question you asked me was, what are, like, can you what emotions? What is an emotion? Can you just what are emotions are there?
Yeah, what are feelings or emotions I might have asked.
Yeah, and you told me to give examples.
Yeah, of just like what they are, like their base definition or their base word. Not even a definition, just what they are as what is an emotion, what is a feeling. And you had
As a
difficulty doing
difference,
that.
what's the difference between emotion and a feeling?
No, just like what is an emotion or a feeling, because they're kind of the same word.
Okay,
They're very, very close.
I believe that there is a emotion that is like a physiological response, and that your cognition comes after your physiological response.
Yeah, but I think that's how a feeling is as well.
Yeah, well, they're
So
basically
it's
the
like I
same
have a
thing.
like yeah, that's why I said emotion or feeling because they're kind of the same thing in my like definition at least. So maybe my definition is incorrect. I have to just read up on it real quick, but I use them as like interchangeable. I was just saying what are they like? What is a base feeling or emotion? And you were
Right.
having difficulties saying one. That's what
No, no, no. I
happened.
didn't have difficulty. What I said was my first one I said was fear, fear or
Um,
anxiety.
you
Then I
might have
said,
had what do you
then I
call it? You
said
might have gave me a description of one first, but then you went to fear. I do agree you did give fear at one point, but
I
I
did
just
fear, and then
believe you gave like
I
a description first.
gave fear, and then I said rage.
Yeah.
And then you started telling me that I'm only giving negative emotions.
No, it was more. It's very complex, so it's not necessarily negative. It's like a specific amount, like specific emotions, and like sadness or any like pain or any of those type of emotions were like lacking. And the only other emotion you might have given to is like happiness or contentment,
I
like being
didn't.
content.
I
I
I
don't know if
only
you did because I've had multiple conversations with
right,
people,
right.
so that
I
one I
only
don't know.
said negative emotions, but to me, negative emotions are a lot more real than happiness. Happiness is just too.
I'd
Um,
say there's two different forms.
Well, there's
of
it's just too
happiness.
complex. Happiness is like a cluster of
Different feelings.
properties, and if you match enough of them, you could call that happiness.
Um, yeah, I guess I would say like there's like a difference between like happiness, like true happiness, and just like content, like something that just makes you like
So what
content, not
what
like
is
actually
true
happy.
happiness? What is true happiness?
True happiness is like something that's like deeper, like a connection with somebody, something that makes you truly happy that takes like a lot more effort, usually in life.
I feel a connection. There's an emotion that I've because that question you asked me, I've been dwelling on, and I feel like there is an emotion that I have that I don't think there's a word for, but it's when I really connect with somebody, and
Yeah, that you just kind of like click, if you want to
when we
call it like that.
share an intimate exchange, and I realize we're really connecting, and I get this
Yeah,
feeling. Um,
yeah. Is it like intuitive? Like just like an intuitive thing that you just kind of just, because you're saying feeling, so I assume it's intuitive that you just kind of sense it.
um, I experience my feelings uh, sort of physiologically.
Okay. Just like only physical, you mean? So not even like mentally physical? Just to separate it, just because I'm making sure.
What do you mean by mentally physical?
Well, could you say like physiologically? Do you just mean like in your body and you feel like your body and have symptoms of like emotions come through your body and like you feel like the hairs on your skin go up like when you're a little tense or whatever you want to
Body and
call it?
mind all together.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't know. That's what I was trying to make sure. I was just asking for more context.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Let's see.
What does this refer to? What we were just saying and talking about?
Um, I'm just saying how I experience. I was just saying that I like I feel an emotion that I don't have a description for.
Yeah, when you just feel like a connection with somebody, but you don't know what it is. It just you feel connected to somebody. Is it after like a long time with somebody, or is it just like you just get that
Um,
feeling? Like sometimes you just feel like you understand that person. Like that person is the same, is the way I would
Actually,
say
no.
it.
You know what it is? It's when I feel like someone else understands me.
Yeah,
Because I feel like I understand people.
and
I
it's
know.
feeling
I
like
know that you
understood.
feel like you understand people.
Yeah, but it's just
Um,
feeling understood by someone, like automatically,
yes. Yes.
which
Well,
is yeah a very rare feeling to me.
yeah.
And I do
Okay.
find
So
it, but it's rare.
you said you wanted to talk about alexithymia.
Yeah,
What's that?
that's like having. This is like a very spectrumy of a word, not because of autism, but spectrum as in like it can be different levels, as in someone having the ability to understand or know their emotions even, and then even conveying that afterwards. So it's a mix of both. So it's either even just understanding what emotion they're going through or what their feelings are, and then conveying it. So it could represent. It can get complicated when you look at things like PTSD, depression, and if alexithymia is there, that could cause a problem if someone doesn't know why they're depressed or why they're distressed,
Right. Okay.
or they can't
Um.
convey it to like a doctor or psychologist.
Okay. Okay. I remember my main contention with your thesis in general is that because I think we'll get back to alexithymia.
Yeah,
But
I just wanted to like bring it up to because I don't know
yeah,
if we talked about it in the other discussion.
yeah. My main contention is that you're talking about a process of. I'm reading what a quote here that I wrote or typed out or
Yep, no
copied and
problem.
pasted. Okay, you described a process for helping someone with PTSD or something,
Yeah,
and then you give some bullet points. First, you need to make sure they want this,
yeah.
and then if they don't want it, then you can't
You
push
have to like
through
keep
it.
asking for like consent because first off, they have to
I
want to
don't
like go
I don't
through it.
think that they can know what is good for them on that level.
It's more of like someone knowing like they came to me in the first place saying they wanted this. It
Yeah,
wasn't something that like I even brought up to them. It's more of like they were looking for answers about their own mind.
but it sounds like you're
So
talking about therapy.
Yeah, pretty much. I've helped people a lot of the time, and I've kind of done like therapy without being a therapist. But that's
Hmm.
just kind of self-learned therapy. I'm a self-learned therapist without being a therapist,
Okay.
which can't really go against ethics boards because I'm not a part of an ethics board. But you know how it goes, I guess.
Hmm. So you are not afraid to open up someone's trauma.
And be there for them, which I think is a problem with society in general, that people don't support each other. So I think that should be more normal and just people just being there through someone's trauma or being there for people that they know, especially when it's like family, friends, and stuff like that. But it seems like that's a lacking part of society.
Right. But um,
So I just do it for people when I meet them,
I would say
no
that
matter what.
a big part of reading someone is knowing when it, like, if you were truly going to be a great mind reader, you're going to want to know when someone opening up about their trauma is going to make it worse or better, because
Yeah,
often it will
but
make
the
it
only way,
worse.
I don't know if it would necessarily make it worse.
I
It would just
think
be
that's
more
I think
like,
that's a true thing.
no, I would think it would just make it so that, so it's not necessarily it makes it worse. So like how it like would represent in a person is just more they would become more emotional. It's usually they're repressing their emotion, and then they would just become more emotional because they're not used to being emotional, and then they might have to train that part of their brain to understand their emotions more, or learn to like, you know, deal with their emotions versus just repressing.
I think when you make someone relive their trauma, that I think that I'm very confident that it's a known, documented thing that doing this has a high risk of just making them reinforcing their trauma
Traumatized by even things they're not traumatized to, by just after the fact
by
conversation.
just living through it,
No,
just
just by a
talking about it,
conversation. But I
just
mean, a
talking about it.
conversation that, no, but I'm saying they can have their mind primed and feel traumatic to something that they weren't traumatized before. So it's super complex. So someone can just like have a normal relationship with someone, get out of the relationship, then other people will be like, "Oh, that thing that happened to you, that was trauma. You were traumatized," and then they'll start feeling traumatized
That's not
because
what
they'll
I'm
start
talking
being
about.
like, "Yeah, but I'm just saying how complex it can be."
What I'm
So,
talking
and
about is like
I know that
someone.
I'm not like referring exactly to what you're saying. The reason I'm not is because it's so complex. It doesn't necessarily matter. It's mainly that people are traumatized. Going over the trauma is the only way they can get over the trauma. If they don't, they'll do some type of self-defense mechanism to deal with it.
Yeah, but it's not like, so what I'm saying is, get, yeah, okay, maybe,
Yeah.
but um and thank you. I'm happy with the fisheye lens too. Someone in chat. Um, the trauma. When people relive when you are, trauma is something you don't think about, and reliving it, especially if
Yes.
you aren't ready, like you're probably gonna want to know you're gonna be talking about your trauma like days beforehand or something. Like there's no, maybe not that like it's complex, but there's like a million things
Yeah.
to
But
make
it's
it a
not like
good
I'm telling
situation.
somebody they have to talk about it. It's just one of those things when they want to talk about it, they
Yeah,
can
you
talk.
should do it with a professional. Someone said, because
Yeah.
the
I
the act
understand that.
of the
But a
act
lot
of
of
talking about it.
professionals don't actually do anything.
True,
The system
but
that's in place is pretty flawed. That's
the act.
why
Yeah,
I
but
have this
I'm
issue
trying
in
to
the
tell
first
you
place.
I'm trying to tell you something though. Well, I'm telling you that the act of reliving it, and because when you are
Oh,
when you
yes.
have a traumatic experience and you go over it, your you can genuinely feel it in your whole
Opening up
body.
the emotions, yes.
You feel like you're
Because
on
they're
fire.
repressing the emotion.
You feel
Yes.
horrified,
Yes.
and the act of reliving that
They
can
open the
literally
emotions
and
up, yes.
often literally makes it worse.
It doesn't necessarily make it worse at all. It depends on how
It
it's done.
does. It does make it worse for
If you just
people.
say it does, then that's not a
It
conversation then.
like you can come out, you can talk about it with, especially with like a therapist or something, but there is a lot of ways that can go bad, and the most important part is the context around where and how you're talking about it,
Yes.
and the care during and after.
I've been
and
doing this my whole life.
there's a lot of
So I understand the
danger.
societal norms of saying how this is not like you're not a clinical therapist or anything like that. I don't consider myself a clinical therapist.
I'm
I
not
just
even saying.
understand people.
I'm not
No,
even
let me
talking
just
to you
finish my
about.
statement. Let me
Wait, I
just
was
finish my
talking.
statement. If you want to continue, then continue, and then I'll finish my statement.
Okay, you say what you have to say.
No, just go ahead.
No, I'm good. I know. I'm good. I'll hear you. I want to hear what you have to say.
So, just because I'm not a clinical therapist doesn't mean I might have or not have the actual ability to actually do correct therapy to people or better therapy. Going off of just a societal norm or a title is like just using societal norms of saying like, hey, you don't have this badge, so you don't have any capability of having that understanding. You can't know this knowledge. You don't have the degree. A lot of people can do a lot of like fields without having any college background and do better than people that go to college.
Sure.
So that's what I'm getting at. Because that's what kind of the like meta conversation that's happening currently.
I think that's a simplification. What I'm just saying is there's a lot of danger. And prior to me saying that, you were saying that there is no danger, or that like, why am I assuming that it's dangerous and could make it worse?
Yeah, I'm not saying it very black and white. So when I say there isn't danger, I'm not saying fully. I'm just saying if you do things correctly, things will go well. Like, it's very, everything I say is always on a spectrum. So I'll be saying words very much on a spectrum versus just saying them very black or white.
So it is dangerous to relive your trauma.
Not necessarily. It's more that it will open up your emotion.
When I say dangerous, that doesn't mean it's going to hurt you.
They will become more emotional.
It doesn't mean it's going to hurt you. It's that it could make it worse. It could make it better. It could make it worse, and that's dangerous.
Yes, but just because something is unknown does not mean that you shouldn't do it.
I think it means you should be
patient, calm. Well, yeah, exactly. But that doesn't mean I'm not.
So what ways could it go wrong when someone's opening up about their trauma?
If someone's forcing them to open up, or someone's attacking them, or someone's being very like violent with them and causing a new traumatic experience on top of it, versus actually being understanding and empathetic and like being there for the person, allowing them to have agency and allowing them to speak for them. Like, those are the two opposites, like how the situations could go different.
Well, someone in chat just said you need to be able to be held accountable to do it correctly. That might be a good thing about therapy, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm what you just said, Cakes.
Yeah.
Was that
if it's done aggressively and done like
right? That's not what I'm saying, though.
That would be actually a bad way of doing it.
I'm saying that
would actually cause trauma.
Just opening, yeah. I'm saying just opening up about it at all can make it worse.
I would disagree.
Reliving. I'm 100% confident that reliving it, depending on context, it very often does make it worse for people. You have to do
it.
Right, but.
So it's either that you want them to live as a husk of a human,
but
a former self.
What I'm saying,
or get better.
What I'm saying is the thing that makes it harmful versus beneficial isn't just you're aggressively forcing them to be forthcoming with their emotions and their trauma. It's internally their experience of reliving the trauma can make it worse.
It's more that it makes them emotional. Is what happens.
No,
because they're not emotional beforehand, because they're repressing their emotion.
Because when
they're doing that, then they are going to feel all the emotions attached to the memory, because we have memories attached to emotions.
Right.
So if our emotions and memories are attached, that's why some people can forget certain memories. They repress the emotion to repress the memory. When they get the memory back, they then start feeling the emotion again. So then they can be more emotional and feeling distress.
I was just about to say that when you relive your trauma and you become welled up with these emotions, you're gonna be experiencing a lot stronger emotions than you probably even did during the trauma, and you could just be reinforcing those emotions into the memory.
I don't know if that would actually be true. Either way, the only way the person gets better is to go through the emotion. They have to get used to those emotions, and they have to get used to the memory, and they have to get better over the memory, and they have to feel like they have agency again. So the main reason that people do that is because of a lack of control in a situation. So most situations that people have PTSD over is when they lose the ability to like have self-agency and take care of a situation the way they want to, like a kid getting bullied.
Hmm.
But the only way to like get them to be a whole person again is to open up their emotional side again. They'll become like half a human. Like they'll be using half their brain all the time. They'll be using mostly their logical side to like cope. So it can be seen as traumatic, but I don't think that's traumatic. I think that's just a part of the process. Sometimes there's a little bit of pain with some process in life.
I believe I'm 100% confident that just reliving your trauma can make it worse. And
And again, I would
it's
say
the
if you do it
responsibility
the wrong
of
way.
it's like you need to do it in the proper context where
What is proper context?
somebody who is watching and is aware of what emotions you're experiencing and how you're doing it and is able to, so what you do, well, here's where it goes wrong, here's where and this is, I'm not a professional, but I'm telling you what I believe, here's where it goes wrong.
Yeah, what your
you
belief
start
is.
you
Yeah.
start opening up, and it's not because someone's aggressively forcing you to open up, it's actually the aggressor is you. So say I'm opening up about my trauma,
Yeah,
and
that would be
I start like a fountain, it just gushing out blood, and I start just bleeding out, and I'm not controlling. I have no once it starts coming out, I am
no
now
ability to deal with it. They're
my
trying to like
I
just
am
let
not
it out.
regulating it whatsoever,
Yeah, I agree.
and I'm becoming incredibly emotional, and I'm experiencing all of it incredibly rapidly, which is
Yeah,
far worse than the actual event itself. I'm experiencing it all at once,
yeah. It's like having a
and
like light bulb go in
you
their head
need
of emotion.
somebody who's aware of exactly what's happening
Yeah,
and is able to make sure that you stop and slow down. Because what a therapist will do is they're like, okay, stop. Let's talk about this. We're not going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about this one thing. Because
yeah,
if you just bleed out, it's going to
yeah,
make it worse. We're not going to focus on one thing or here. Okay, when we dissect that, just today, all we're going to talk about is the when you put on your pants that morning. That's all we're going to talk about. Tomorrow we'll talk about when you open your door to leave your room.
my experiences with therapy, the way they actually go about most therapy, not all, because there's like CBT, DBT, REBT, there's different therapy styles, but the
Hmm.
most used normal therapy is you sit there and they just let you bleed out. So that is how it's dealt with. It's not someone that's actually going back and forth with you like how you see in old movies of like a therapist sitting there with a piece of paper and taking notes and asking questions and trying to keep you on path and
Hmm.
actually going back and forth. That would be more REBT therapy.
I've been to therapy, and I've been to different
You might
therapists,
have had a different therapist that did do that.
and I've experienced both
But
of what
that,
you're talking about.
yes.
And what I'm telling you is I believe that bleeding out can make it worse,
Yeah,
and
because
it
then you don't
often
have a
does.
support there. I would say because yes, because you don't have a support there. You don't have someone actually listening or helping in the like process.
It's
It's
not
just someone that's just
listening.
letting you bleed out.
It's not listening. It's making you it's regulating you and making you slow down and focus on more. You can't
Making you be aware
not being
of
aware,
certain things.
making you focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah, that's aware of a
That's
certain thing.
the what thing a
Focus,
therapist
it's
does.
maybe if you want to use focus as the word, we can use focus, but it's the same thing we're saying, just different.
No, because focus, you could be saying focus on the trauma, and you could be talking about a giant.
Yes, but I'm saying on one thing, like you said, I said one thing as well.
Okay,
So when I said
focus
aware
on
of one
one.
thing, so focus on one thing, we just use a different word. But I'm saying aware of one thing. So like you're making your awareness go to one thing. You're not looking at the bigger problem, you're aware of only the one aspect. We're just saying it different.
Hmm.
So we're like saying the same thing there.
So is this what you do?
Yeah, I've always been like this. This is just how I've always been, which I think maybe just goes to like most psychology. First, psychologists were very autistic to begin with, so it might just be a way of how we speak
Hmm.
and understand other people.
Do you still think I have PTSD?
I have no idea yet. I just have like an assumption from like what do you call it? Likely assumption because of how like the first time we talked. I don't know enough information right now to go into it like deeper.
Hmm.
is more like a eureka or like a, this seems like this is like happening, but doesn't mean it is. It's just more of like a, I seen a pattern with other people that I've talked to, and all humans seem to be very similar to some degree. I just don't know if that's autistic humans or normal humans or what, like neurotypical or autistic. But it's very complex, so it's hard to really know.
Do you think I'm autistic?
I don't know.
By the way, I don't think I'm autistic, but my hat says I am, but I'm not. Just if you're watching, um, I'm just being
right.
I'm just being
Hat must be right.
Yeah. um, by the way, if you don't mind, I have a criticism of your writing.
Yeah.
Um, but you can completely discard me. But I think that you severely overuse the slash and or.
Yeah. It's because I'm trying to find words that'll fit like different people's ways of speaking.
It
And
makes it
it's like I'm
hard
not
to read
fully
a.
sure on what. Yeah, I know. That's more of my like autistic equation of me
Yeah.
speaking more like I would like to speak. It's more of
Okay.
like an equation of like and or, like that type of shit,
Mhm.
where it's more of like an and or if then statement. So I will like probably translate it after it's out of my head. But me doing that while I'm trying to write it down is way harder. So I agree. For other people to understand it, it's not good.
Okay, so earlier, the other time we were talking, we were arguing about. You were talking about empathy as understanding someone's thought process.
No.
No, okay, then what would
You
you
might have
say it is?
misunderstood. There's
Okay.
two different types of empathy:
Okay.
cognitive and emotional. Cognitive is putting yourself in someone else's perspective, and that's done through more context and more understanding of their situation. The more you know about their situation, the easier you can put yourself in their context and put them, in their perspective. And then emotional empathy, where you just feel what the other emotion that the other person's feeling.
Hmm.
So if they're like distressed or sad, you feel sad, and you feel like a sadness in you just for being near them. Don't even have to like necessarily hear the conversation, depending how strong your emotional empathy is.
Can you understand someone's emotions using cognitive empathy?
Yes, but it's more of like a logical thing, where you're logically putting yourself in the perspective. It's using like the logical side of the brain and the prefrontal cortex. I think it's like the right side of your prefrontal cortex is where cognitive empathy is done. It's not really an emotional empathy type thing. So that's why it's separated. It's
But
more
I'm
of like
I'm
an
asking
active
it.
processing thing.
But you can use it to understand someone's emotions. You think?
To some degree. But if you have disagreements in how you view certain things in the world, you can have differences in how you feel about it. So sometimes you won't have, and it's very complex where sometimes you might not feel emotional empathy in a situation because you don't like see their rationalization or their like logic correct. So you don't understand why they're feeling the way they are. You might think they're illogical or maybe low
Hmm.
IQ or whatever. It can be complex. So they can
Okay.
kind of like be hand in hand with each other and sometimes like reinforce the other.
Okay.
But sometimes you'll have more emotional empathy from the cognitive, sometimes cognitive to the emotional, sometimes it's just singular. It's complex.
That sounds fine. I think you're overusing saying something's complex, but
Yeah, I'm doing that maybe just to say that I have more to say, just because
or
it
maybe you're
can
not
be,
sure or
or
entirely
maybe
sure.
no, it's more that like putting into words is complicated for people to understand. It's not very simplistic in how the mind does these things.
Mm-hmm.
So talking about it, even if you look at the definition of cognitive empathy and emotional empathy, it's just very basic and very short and just says, oh, you feel someone else's emotions, and then cognitive is just you put yourself in their perspective. It's a very,
Okay.
very quick, concise definition versus
That
like more
intuitively
context.
sounds like it makes sense. The cognitive and emotional empathy.
Yeah,
Okay. Um.
but my brain
So
also uses more context. Maybe that's why I also say it's complex because I have to add more context because that's how I work.
okay.
Just to give you more of
Okay.
like
Okay.
an
Okay. Okay.
understanding of why.
So why do you think that Mr. Girl is autistic?
I feel like we shouldn't have this discussion on stream without him, just because that doesn't feel right.
Well,
That's why I've always tried
he
having the
says.
discussion with him directly, and he
Well,
doesn't want to have it. He doesn't want to have it. I'm not trying to force it on him.
okay.
I just don't think it's right to have the conversation about someone online in like a public area about their mental health or what their brain is when they're not here. If they don't want to have the discussion, then we shouldn't have the discussion, like around them. Like, I mean, away from them, but in a public area type thing.
I'm getting the empathetic read that he doesn't care if we talk about it.
That
But
doesn't mean we should or not. I still don't think it's right, so I won't.
okay. Um, alexithymia.
Yeah,
You said alexithymia or PTSD.
yeah, it's complicated again. They can like overlap, like anything in psychology. There's a lot of overlaps with everything.
Okay, so you're saying that. So I got a sense from your article you've written
Yeah, or my
um,
my rambling.
that you're saying that a lot of things stem from trauma.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of all of our conditions we have are very trauma. Even when we look at like how they represent, usually they say it's genetic and then trauma, but
Hmm.
they're not sure genetically how to show that it's genetic or have any like deep way of showing it. We don't do MRI scans. We don't do any like blood tests. We don't do any DNA tests or anything to say like, oh, this is what you have. We don't have any like sure way of doing psychology. All we do is just go off how the symptoms seem. But it seems like the symptoms are very erratic, and it seems like autistic people are usually the ones that have these symptoms.
Hmm. I always got
Because
the
they put themselves in
impression.
more in harm way. I was gonna say, but yeah, sorry.
Hmm. There was a sentence that you wrote that I thought applied to me
It was
regarding
the
putting.
naive one, right?
I'm not naive, or maybe yeah, the naive one.
It was in the word. Yeah, it was in one of the
Um,
words there.
or vulnerable and or in the line of fire of hurt people.
Yeah,
Um, and I'm very willing to put myself in the line of fire of hurt people.
yeah,
But
like
for
overly
me,
empathetic.
hmm?
It's like a maybe a different, maybe a shorter, easier way of saying it is like overly empathetic, like self-sacrificing. Maybe that's like a
Maybe.
way of putting it in different words that might sound more concise.
And what does that mean to you if someone's like that?
I would probably think they're autistic because autistic people seem to be more empathetic from what research says, and from my experience and from my father, we were always just people that were like always putting ourselves in the line of fire, but then nobody would do the same ever. It was always just kind of how I've always lived my life and how he always lived his life.
Hmm.
And anytime he had like autistic meltdowns when he got too stressed, they would just classify it as bipolar. But he never agreed having bipolar, and I don't think he had bipolar, and I've never had bipolar. So I think he was just classified with bipolar because the time that he went to the doctors around like 80s or 70s, bipolar was the new craze. And that was just like, well, it seems like the most like new research says bipolar is the new craze, so you have bipolar. Just like kids in the 90s were like, hey, you have ADHD, because everybody has ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how much of this is just autistic minds that represent differently and blossom differently than the neurotypical mind. So pretty much
But
neurodivergent.
do you think autism can stem from trauma?
No, I think it's
No.
just a genetic thing.
Okay, I was gonna say, I was getting the impression that you're saying a lot of things stem from trauma, and I agree with that, but I think that one of the things that doesn't seem to stem from trauma is autism.
Yeah, I just think autism people, like people that are autistic, are more empathetic and they're more understanding of others or try to understand more. Not maybe cognitively because they have maybe differences in how they view the world, but they put themselves in more situations with distressed people. So they have more traumatic experiences and then they start to represent like traumatic experiences or traumatic like they break down as a person. They're pretty much like a
Okay.
sponge of empathy that then like breaks down at a certain point of like their life expectancy.
Okay, so you're saying that autistic people expose themselves and get fucked up.
Yeah, pretty much. And it
That
even
kind
goes to
of
like
that kind of
the
makes sense
death,
to me.
yeah, the death period of like autistic people or like the death expectancy or suicide expectancy. I know it's on stream, can't really talk about that stuff, but it's around like 30, and they
Okay,
have like
well,
a
we're
very
talking
high
about
expectancy of that.
statistics and psychology,
Yeah,
not talking about anything
yeah. I
personal
was
and
trying to
stuff.
make it, yeah, make
Yeah,
it known that wasn't in any bad way.
yeah.
But it's
Um,
like around 30 that they usually break down or like have higher suicide rates, and I think females have like an 8 times like jump up in that. But I might be wrong on the information, but I
hmm.
believe so,
That
which
makes
is
sense to
really
me.
high for females too. Yeah.
Someone in chat says it's 36.
That's the exact age.
I don't know. That's what someone. That's what Freet Whistler says.
Which I could understand that being 33.
Okay.
So I feel like I'm past my due date.
Um. So okay? So I think that makes sense to me. I mean, I can't prove that, and you can't prove that, but I think that's an interesting
Like
theory.
intuitive, yeah. It's like more of a theoretical hypo like thesis or
Right.
something that like we're looking at abductively.
But I think that makes sense as a explanation of the experience of an autistic person and their vulnerability.
Yeah. Could
And
then
how
represent more trauma.
yeah, and then they get more fucked up. I mean, I just made a video about Chris Chan, who was autistic and
Yeah.
extremely exposed himself to these trolls
Yeah.
that took advantage of him, and he got more and more fucked up, worse and worse and worse. Um, so that intuitively makes sense to me. But let's see. Hold on, I'm just gonna change something here.
Yep, no problem.
But so as a analysis of the experience of an autistic person, that makes sense. But I don't think that makes sense as a diagnostic tool.
I think it's more that this is why it's so like rambly, or like my whole thesis doesn't make sense yet, or it's all over the place, is more that the whole system is being done in a very detrimental way that's causing people that might be autistic, especially because we don't know how many people in the world are autistic to begin with. We could have like 50% of the population are actually autistic and just don't know it. But then that causes them distress and feeling like they're second guessing themselves constantly. Am I insane? Why are people saying I'm insane? Why are people not hearing me out? Why do people not understand what distresses me? Why do I have different ways of feeling distress than other people? Why do people not get me? And all those feelings then cause them tons of distress, tons of like
Sure,
solitude or avoidance or fear.
sure, but I'm that might be true, but I'm not. I'm
I'm
saying
just
that
adding that to like the theory, like to the idea that we already were talking about,
right.
just so it has more context, is all.
I'm saying that I don't think from what you're saying you can say that someone that opens them up and is vulnerable to other people and exposes themselves in such a way. I don't think that you can diagnose them with autism just by that.
Yeah, I know that. But one thing we can do is actually do MRIs on people's minds to see autism.
Yeah.
So why don't we use neurology to actually do that test on people? But the system doesn't do that. Instead, we just do this really guessing game thing of just giving people psychological disorders. And just guessing that they have something when everything in psychology is all very similar. Everything has overlap in psychology. ADHD, OCD, ASPD, all of this has overlap. But yet, instead of looking at it with a way that we can actually analyze it and see it like mental health as like normal physical health, instead we do this process of just not fixing the problem and just putting band-aids on things.
Right.
We're not looking at the problem deeply.
I would say that those have overlap because they're not real in the way that autism is real.
Yeah.
Like they're
They
real
might
as
just
far as
represent from
they're
trauma.
they're clusters. My way of describing it is that they are clusters of attributes and traits
Yeah.
that
But how much
present
could that
themselves,
be?
but
Let me
it can
let you finish, then I'll
come
say.
from different
Yeah.
places, and it can mean different things. And I think a lot of it probably is from trauma. Someone in chat just said, I found, this is the person that said the 36 thing. This person said, I found things got a lot better when I began to spend more time with other autistic people.
Yeah, that's also known with the double empathy problem. that autistic people get along with autistic people better, and neurotypical people get along with neurotypical people better. They just have similar minds, so they just get each other more. And that might go to that feeling of you just feel like you get somebody that you were saying at the beginning. That intuitive feeling that you just seem similar.
That's not what I meant when I said gets. It's actually when someone that's not similar to me.
Yeah, but they understand you.
Then
But how do you
when
know they're not similar?
after an hour of talking to someone that isn't similar to me, then after talking for an hour, then I can see that they get me. That's like a really like an emotion that's a unique emotion.
Yeah,
Um,
but is that maybe that they are similar in the end? You guys were maybe talking around each other? It could be complex
I
to
don't
even
think so.
understand, and just like that would have to be like breaking down the
Well,
experiences, I guess, more in depth to really understand.
I feel like I'm talking to a different person than I was talking to last time when we were fighting.
Yeah, because I wasn't trying to have that conversation, so I was getting aggravated and stressed out. Because I was like just trying to have a different conversation, then you kept like wanting and forcing a different conversation. When all I was like asking for Kay, because me and Kay were having a nice, delightful conversation, was like, hey, let's just get a third person in here because you want to see if like what I'm saying is correct. And then we kind of went down a rabbit hole really quickly,
Right.
and I was not
You were
prepared or ready for
saying
that conversation.
that his speech patterns were to you
Different.
showing that he was becoming overwhelmed and
I would say
cognitively
more of a
slowing,
shutdown.
cognitively
It was like a
slowing down.
cognitive shutdown. Yeah, I would say a cognitive shutdown. Is
But
how I
he
would
asked me to
describe it.
come in because I've talked to him plenty of times, and he wanted me to tell you that that's just how he talks.
Okay. So
And
then maybe the way that it got referred to you was different than what I thought he was saying to you. Because when we talked together, I said it differently, and we both talked about it differently, and then I went and got my laundry from downstairs. So you can see how we had a misunderstanding at the beginning because of how things were conveyed. Like a difference in
what was the
telephone game.
misunderstanding?
How Kay represented it versus like what me and Kay I thought we're talking about. So we had like a difference of understanding in just our conversation, and then when he referred it
Well,
outwardly,
you were
it was
saying he
said
was
differently.
autistic, right?
No,
No? What were you saying?
we were just talking about his brother and how he could help his like brother situation. But I don't want to go deep into anything Kay, just because it's not here and it's on stream.
Yeah. So it's about his brother.
Yeah,
But yeah, I was just talking about the cognitive slowing thing.
yeah.
Um,
The only thing with that was just I could see that his speech pattern was getting tired with like his logical side of his brain. I was super aware of like how he was speaking before, and he was starting to speak like he even got better from the time of me going down to the basement and just getting my laundry, which can happen that quickly. Like a shutdown can be quickly. Uh, but the brain is just like doing a lot of prefrontal cortex work. And then anytime you ask anything logical of the brain, you can hear a slowdown in the speech pattern, or even like a lot of ums. Like the brain's trying to like, you can just notice it. But I'm just like hyper aware of people's patterns,
how
and I
about me?
focus on it a lot. You sound the same as you did before.
Yeah, but what do my patterns tell you about me?
I don't have any difference in pattern. You're just yourself currently. So that's what I mean by patterns. I mean like a difference in pattern, I guess is what I mean.
I feel
So
like
K was
I can
different
get
than
a
his norm.
I feel like I can get a read off of somebody without experiencing change in how they're presenting themselves, but just from how they talk in general.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So I'm kind of saying the same thing. But you're not changing or having a difference in
Right.
speech.
Yeah, but so do you need me
You're
to have a
being,
difference in order to understand what like have
well,
a
you kind of said the same thing, but just different. What you just said. You just said like when they have a change in their way that they act, like a different from their base
right? I
or their
think you can
baseline.
get a read off of someone without seeing a change.
Yeah, what do you mean by read? Because maybe you're just using a word and you mean way more with that word than what I think. But maybe I'm taking the word too literally, or
Read
like taking it very
is
like
just an
not
experience of
colloquial.
An experience of empathy.
An experience of empathy. What is that even?
Um,
An
understanding
experience of empathy.
emotional or cognitive
Yeah,
processes
so
of
you're saying
someone
like,
else.
so you're trying to say something as like me feeling or understanding the person, like, and
Mm-hmm.
empathizing, because understanding and empathy kind of, go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I can empathize without that, so no, I don't need to have like a difference in speech. This is more just me being analytical with his mind, and me like noticing a speech difference because of
No, I'm
me
talking
being
about
around
me.
people having a shutdown. Yeah, I know. I'm saying the K thing just because it's a difference. There's no difference in this situation. There's nothing analytical that we're doing different in this conversation. You're not acting different with the way you're speaking. There's nothing that I can refer to. So you're asking a question I can't answer because there's no difference.
Hmm.
You just seem like you're
Well,
just
the
being
reason I
negative.
ask that is because I tend to pause and say something I notice that
Yeah,
I do
I
when I
meant
talk.
like a lot. What I meant. I
I
meant like
start a
um.
sentence. There's something I do. I notice a lot of. I'll start a sentence, and then I will stop my sentence, start a new sentence, stop that sentence, and then start a new sentence, and then start like a fifth sentence. And then after I finish the fifth sentence, I go back to the first one, and then I finish all of the sentences.
Yeah,
And it
almost like
sounds
it's like
really,
you're
really dumb.
translating in real
It,
time.
it sounds really, yeah, it sounds really dumb.
Yeah, I don't know how much that could be something with you like translating your speech so people understand you to the way they speak. You trying to match other people
Probably.
because I do that all the time. So I can speak differently with different people, have a mask, you want to call it, and be very different personality seeming just to match the person so they
I
feel
don't think I'd
comfortable.
change my personality.
My personality is not necessarily different. I would be more like a persona or like a mask is the best way I would put it. Where I can have like one that like it acts more like my uncle, where it was very outgoing and
Hmm.
very like expressive and trying to make people feel comfortable by making them like whatever they need. I would fit the role.
For me, it's just trying to translate my thoughts into words.
Yeah,
I don't.
that's my
I'm
issue
not. I'm
too.
not a very linguistic thinker
Yeah,
usually.
I'm very visual myself.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so you might be a visual thinker and have autism. Just say
Does that mean I have autism?
maybe very similar to me. I'm very quick on like saying things. Doesn't mean it's true. I'm just saying there's a likelihood.
I took a spatial intelligence test once.
Okay.
I
Which
scored a
one's
90.
spatial? Is that like for your visuals?
Yeah, visual intelligence.
Yeah.
I got 99th percentile on that.
Autistic people are very much about their eyes versus their ears. I don't know if that's true for all autistic people or some, like visual thinkers versus others. We're supposed to be very visual, very analytical, and I don't know if that's like ADHD mixed with autism because of how much we're paying attention to everything. Like I'm seeing everything around me. Like I'm very aware of everything going on. I'm always paying attention to too much information.
That's something that autistic people have told me that I never understood and can't relate to.
What? Paying attention to too much information or what?
I mean, I have ADHD, so I have an attention span that is um, not ideal, I guess you could say. But
Deal or is it attention span is so like say the opposite. Like you're attentive to everything, so then you can't focus on one thing. But then sometimes you'll have like a spurt of hyper focus, and then you really focus on one thing. Also, it
that's,
matters if you're on a medication or not.
yeah. Someone
So I
said
don't know
we
if you take medication.
abbreviate. I do, but someone said we abbreviate our thoughts to try to condense them because we have learned neurotypical people prefer that, but
Yeah,
in doing so, we
I
get
agree with that.
misunderstood.
Yeah, they like being very concise, neurotypical. I like being very
Hmm.
contextual and very long and
Right.
monologue.
I don't. That's not my experience. I don't like being very contextual and long.
We might be similar in ADHD. So
Yeah.
you
I
might be more
just.
neurotypical with ADHD
Yeah.
or neurodivergent with ADHD, but no autism.
I just. I'm not thinking in words. Like I'm thinking in concepts, and
Yeah, like you can like fully see pictures. Like I can break down
I
a
can
motor
see
when I'm like
pictures,
thinking
but
about working
actually,
on a motor. I could
actually,
see like a whole video
I'm seeing
of like a
in.
motor.
I think in feelings and concepts.
There's no words, there's no pictures. just
There are
feelings and
there are
concepts.
words, there are pictures, there are feelings, and there are concepts, and it's not any train or sing or focus on any of them. It's all of them at the same time.
Yeah, like you're saying you could do all of it, but it's not like you only do one and you only stick to one, which I would agree with. I can do like
I
I
can't
can do
tell.
multiple things. It's complex, I guess, in that way, or very
I think I'm just a very intuitive
complicated.
thinker.
Okay, so what
So,
does that mean?
um,
If you can put like a word or definition to it, just because
okay,
I
I
don't have
think
enough info.
this is very interesting to me. I don't know if this is an interesting stream, but I'm just analyzing my own thoughts.
Yeah,
I I will. It's like pattern recognition, and I'm doing it right now when I pause and I say I will, and then I'm thinking. So it's like I start the sentence. Okay, beginning when I'm about to say a statement, I know what I'm trying to say,
the
but I
words.
have no words for it.
Yeah,
Or I don't know how I'm going to say it, and I don't even actually really understand it, but I know where I'm going. So I start the sentence, and then I'm shuffling through
yeah, like a
while
database.
while
Would
keeping
you
in
say
the
like that,
back
or should I
in
let
back
you
of my mind.
finish?
I'm keeping the end of my sentence in mind or where I'm going. I sometimes often I don't know where I'm going. I just know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
And start the sentence, and it's like, okay, no, this fits. Okay, and then get to here, and we're like, when I get to here, no, wait, go back to this part because I fucked this one up, and then I fix this, and then I get to here, and I get to here, and then I go back and I read the whole sentence.
yeah.
Um, I don't
Um,
think that's necessarily autism.
it seems like a mixture of like ADHD. I don't know if it's autism, but I have a different way of explaining how my brain works. But that might be different for everyone. Everyone might have an abstract way of them explaining their brain to something. I don't know. Like me, I would say like when I have to think of a thought or me in conversation is almost like my mind will be talking about something. You'll have a trigger word, and then I'll hear something like SpongeBob or some random thing, and like the Matrix with like that scene where all the guns are flying up, with all the like guns just come out of nowhere in the white room. A bunch of filing cabinets with information will fly up, and then one thing that relates to that word will come up, and then my mind wants to talk about that. That's how my ADHD would be, and how my mind is with like conversation, where I can jump from one topic to another topic to another topic to another topic very quickly, and then I never finish any topic.
I have gotten good at dealing with that.
Yeah,
Someone
but you
in
say you're on
chat,
medication as well.
sure, but even off of it, it's just
And maybe you've just like improved
different.
upon it. Me, I've never had a difference in that. It's always just been me as a part of me.
Um,
And
Someone
maybe
said
better at that is just conforming.
Someone in chat just said executive function issues come with
Yeah,
ADHD. Are you saying that I have executive function issues?
yeah. If you have ADHD,
No, from what I described. Um,
um, I would believe that would be executive functioning. Uh,
an
because that's
issue?
where also I have a lot of issues. Well, it would be issues with it. Yeah,
I feel like I learned my speech patterns from listening to Slavoj Žižek talk.
that
And
is.
he is unable to speak in sentences.
Who is
uh,
he? I don't
he's
know
like
who
a
he is.
philosopher. He's known
Okay.
for going, and he's just like always snorting, always coughing,
Um,
but he's
maybe.
still a good speaker.
But like I would say, at least that's how I learned. Also, is just watching people around me. So if that's someone you watched a lot, that would be how you've learned to talk, because you're like mimicking to some degree. You're learning the pattern of how you should speak from things that you see. So if you think you are seeing someone as a pattern that you like represent as a lot, it could be because it was something that was like important to you or that you watched a lot. And then you might mimic it and not be aware of it. But now you seem aware of it.
What would you tell people um, to decide
But people mimic in general, like
if
normally,
they have
you know
ADHD
that.
or not? By the way, the person in chat said that it sounds like I do have executive functioning issues, you motherfucker. Um, Maybe I
Well,
do.
if you have ADHD, then you would. So it's not like a problem. It would just be a difference in you. Just like me. I have ADHD as well, so I do too. Which
Zizek
is what it
talked
is.
like that before he had a stroke. He's always talked like.
Yeah, that
Actually,
doesn't
you
mean
know
that's
what? He
anything
didn't
with a
talk like
stroke.
that like 30 years ago. Maybe you're right.
Well, like the
So
executive
maybe
functioning differences doesn't mean it's necessarily you have a like neurological disorder that's a problem that's going to harm you, but it could. I don't know if it goes to my like another part of my theory goes to like CBS might be what me and you have in our brains, and we've always had a brain with CBS, which is like cortical syndrome. It might be what ADHD is attached to, or Alzheimer's, which there is the like studies that have been coming out that do see a
mm,
correlation with those two, CBS and AD, with autism.
this person said, I can't do a differential diagnosis. Have you been tested? I was tested for ADHD when I was young. Um,
Which
yeah, I
yeah,
know I have ADHD.
how were you
Um,
tested though?
well,
Like what is a test
whatever it means to have
style?
ADHD. I
Yeah,
don't
what was the
know.
style though?
I
Just
don't
because I
know.
don't know if you were like
This
actually
is
a
what
sit
I
down
remember.
diagnosis or not.
This is
Yeah,
what I remember from the test because I was pretty young.
yeah,
I went in with my mom into the pediatrician who was diagnosing me or testing me.
yeah.
I don't remember what went down in there. All I
That doesn't
remember
sound
is
good.
all I remember is she told me, okay, we're not. I want you to come out here, and she brought me over to the nurses station, and she gave me some crayons and a piece of paper, and she told me to draw my family. And I was like, okay, and I was like, this is part of the test. And then she went back into the doctor's room with my mom,
Hmm.
and then she came back out, and she was like, looked at it, and she's like, oh, well, thank you. Um, you and then you definitely have ADHD or something.
Yeah,
And then
so you
in the
don't even
car
know
ride, and then in
what
the
happened.
car ride home, my mom told me that she was super embarrassed because the reason that she told me to go sit at the nurses station and color, she lied to me. It wasn't part of the test. The reason she did that is because I had
You want to
such
talk to your
bad
mom?
ADHD that I couldn't shut up, and they needed to
Yeah,
get me out of the room so she could talk to my mom.
yeah. And your mom was actually answering the test for you, because usually tests for children go off the parents, like even for autism,
Hmm.
it goes off their perspective. So either way,
Wow.
you didn't matter in the situation. They don't actually talk to you. They don't actually analyze you. It's just someone else's perspective, which again is kind of a part of the problem with psychology.
That's interesting.
So yeah, even with my own autism diagnosis that I was trying to get in my older age, they need to talk to my parents because finding out if someone has autism in an old age is impossible almost because we know how to adapt, like mask. So I won't even know when I'm masking at an appointment, but I've become aware more of where my mask is. So I'm more me now, which has also given me more confidence and made me more calm because I'm not psychoanalyzing myself to try to fit the societal. As a part of the thesis as well, but I haven't put it down yet or made a cycle for it or anything yet.
Why are
It's
you making the
complex
thesis?
because I know I can answer these problems. I've solved it in my head. I just got
What
to
is
get
the
it out of it.
problem? What is the problem?
It's that's why I say it's complex because it's the thesis is the answer. I have to get it all down. It's all in my head. Mainly, it's just the way that we even go about psychology in the first place already makes people feel negative and it makes them psychoanalyze themselves or like gas pile themselves is like the term that I have in the thesis, or we'll say gaslight for here. Where they'll start losing confidence in their own ability to know who they are. They'll start feeling insane all the time. They'll start saying, "Am I insane?" Having that feeling on your own mind is constantly making you then feel anxious anytime you're analyzing anything in the future, because you're always going through this lens of, "Am I insane?" So if someone has bipolar on them or something, or any type of disorder on them, ASPD, schizotypical personality disorder, uh, any of this, it's just going to cause them to already look through a dirty lens instead of actually
Well,
looking
sure,
at themselves and
but that
understanding their own mind.
well, yeah, but I've already solved for that personally. I just think that diagnosis is in itself. I think that.
What?
See, I just did the thing again. I started a sentence and I was like,
Yeah, then you're really going to switch.
I have
I
more
heard
to
it.
say than what I was going to say in that sentence, so I'm going to start over.
Yeah, that's fine.
So
I'll try not to cut you off at all so it doesn't confuse you.
yeah, yeah, and now I don't know what the fuck I'm even talking about. Um,
You were going to say
no, no, no,
diagnosis.
don't worry, don't help me.
Okay.
Diagnosis is psychology has become medicalized, and they want to make it standardized so that they can apply it to everybody in the
Yeah,
same format. the same way,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that just fundamentally
Logic.
contradicts, in my opinion, in my professional Smith opinion.
The Smith badge of approval.
Yes. Um, you cannot medicalize psychology because it's fundamentally a product of your nurture. It's not most
I
of
would
psychology,
almost fully agree.
unlike
I think you're
autism.
very close.
Autism is a counter example that proves my point, though. But there are examples like autism
Yeah.
that
But that's
are
the only ones
nature
that I
and
know of.
not nurture.
Yeah.
But most of psychology is nurture, almost all of it.
I agree.
And
That
you
goes to my
can't
thesis as well.
you can't medicalize the nurture, you're just making vague description.
Vaguism.
Vague,
Yeah, you're
yes,
using
exactly.
vaguism to like
So
diagnose.
my philosophy is there are certain types of psychology that will never be accurate
Yeah.
because they seek to be accurate.
Yeah.
Um,
I would agree. That's why I think BPD and all this stuff is very negative. I think they just should be used as ways to see like this is someone representing with BPD and having like traumatic experience showing in this way, but understanding the fundamental of the person is what is important. And psychology should just be the understanding of that human mind and that person and their experiences.
mhm.
But a lot of it isn't, and a lot of it is just guessing.
But if that's the case,
Rushed.
though, if that's the case, that you need to understand the unique mind of a person. That's the kind of treatment that you're gonna have to be really rich to have access to, because
Yeah,
they
the
can't
way
do that
it
for
is
everybody.
done. Yeah,
So you're
the
gonna
way
have
that
to
it's done is really
Paint
bad.
in broad strokes.
Yep.
And take everything with a grain of salt. Except that people don't want to take it with a grain of salt. They want to believe it. It's like,
Yeah, and like, but I think it also does more harm. The paint of like painting broad strokes and all that stuff is doing more harm because then it makes people believe they have a condition that they might not.
yeah,
even
of
have.
course. And the other
So then
thing
it causes
about
them to just, like,
psychology,
gaslight themselves and actually harm their own mental health and actually
yeah.
put them in a cycle of distress.
The other thing is that I believe that today, what we consider ADHD or whatever, what have you, most comfortable saying ADHD because I'm
Yeah.
familiar.
Mhm.
50 years from now will not make sense as what ADHD is.
Yeah. it might be
And
something
50
completely
years
different.
ago, what we understood psychology to be is completely different because, like I said, it's all nurture and it's not a natural, like, physiological occurrence.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it's attached to like sociology, psychology, systems in play of like how we try to like capitalism, like it's all like linked together, and all
But
of those
it-
effects are causing like a lot of effects in the system.
But we do need it. We do need, like someone in chat just said, the labels are, they need the labels to collect statistics. Or
Yeah,
I would say
agree.
to group,
But-
make groupings of characteristics.
Yeah,
And,
but I think it never should be referred to the patient because then
That's-
that causes more of the cycle of distress, and then the person feeling like they should never even reach out because they're just broken.
Right, you should rarely refer
Or
to
they
the
they
patient.
say like they have BPD or they have this. I feel like that just gaslights that person to then feel more and more like they have BPD. And they start analyzing their own mind through BPD, and it primes their mind to think they're not like a
Yeah.
capable person. So then they start like not asking for help as much. They
Yeah,
stop.
what they
It
should be doing,
destroys their support structures that the person needs.
what they should do, which is probably a lot harder, is actually give, rather than diagnoses like this, in this manner, they should give descriptive statements of exactly the things that you're doing that make them give the diagnosis. But no diagnosis, just descriptive statements based on what you've done and what they see.
I don't even know if that's good. I would say it has to be. I think it doesn't even matter any of that. I think that's just stuff the doctor can know about. But they just need to understand the person and fully what's bothering that person and how to solve what's bothering that person. That is what's really important. But instead, we
If
don't fundamentally look
if
at
I
that,
was
and that
diagnosed
causes
with
all the problem.
If I was diagnosed with BPD, I would rather than being diagnosed with BPD, I'd rather have the doctor tell me exactly why they diagnosed me with BPD. like exactly.
Same thing. Yeah, but you're just asking for more context. I don't think that
I
would
don't
do
want to
anything
get the
better.
diagnosis. I don't want the diagnosis at all. I just want the things that made them diagnose me, but no diagnosis,
Yeah,
because
but then
those are the
so
only
yeah, but
tangible
you're just saying you
things.
just don't want the badge, but you want to know why they think it. So then you're still gonna have the feeling of that you have it.
No,
So
no,
it's not
no,
gonna
no,
do
no.
anything.
Have it. I don't want any
How
diagnosis.
can that be
Like
done?
only like descriptive claims. Like with no, I
Yeah,
wouldn't expect there to be a diagnosis behind it. It's
and then
just
you go to your
they're telling
computer
you
and you
me,
look up those things and you find BPD.
no diagnosis. Like that
Yeah, I
doesn't
know.
exist in my world. What I'm saying is
Okay,
they
you're
tell,
saying a hypothetical of a world that doesn't have
yeah,
any of the
they tell
data that
no
we have
they
currently.
the psychologist analyzes me and they see these a couple patterns of behavior or things I'm doing, the cognitive things, or
Yeah.
like, and
Or
they,
emotional things or whatever it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
they write those down and they tell me you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this.
Yeah,
um
I would agree with that. So the
that
person becomes aware of what they're doing. I
Yes,
agree.
it's
That's
because
a good
that
thing to do.
the
That also goes
diagnosis
to
is
psychology
not,
with something else, by the way, which is like awareness and like some monk practice. It's like a
yeah.
mindfulness slash psychology like study.
Mhm.
So that goes to just like making people aware. Because making them aware, I think, is like number one thing. And I think this will even also help people like Alzheimer's and stuff. If you just keep them aware of their surrounding, I think their mind might not melt as fast.
Someone in chat just said, "This is what I was trying to communicate to my mother earlier. How I don't identify as autistic, even if I fit the criteria." I think that more. That's awesome. Don't identify as it. Fuck it. Even
Yeah,
though
I
I just
just
said earlier, autism is one of the things that actually is kind of natural and not nurture. You don't need.
yeah,
Who cares?
I just I
Just.
disagree with that only from my own perspective. It wouldn't be necessarily like as a claim for everyone to take, whatever you want to call it. It's just more my own perspective. Is that I would use that as a way to like try to tell people that I'm different, so they would try to empathize with me and understand that my mind's different. But every time I've tried that, it doesn't help because they don't know what the fuck autism means. So then when I tell them that, it wouldn't even give them any context,
Right, but
and they
the only
wouldn't ask for
reason you're
more
saying that,
context.
just to be clear, is to just because
Yeah,
autism is distinguished from ADHD, where ADHD is a cluster of attributes and autism is like a literal thing you could
yeah, you
like
see with
scan in
MRI.
someone's brain. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
but there's a
And they
lot of
say that
differences
you
with
can
it
do that
for
with
autism.
ADHD, and that's bullshit.
Maybe with like the speed of which like the mind is moving, but I don't
Well,
know how
no,
we can see it.
I
It
my
might be
theory
possible, and they just don't want to do it.
my theory is just that
It's like
if you
money.
take people with similar clusters of behavior and you scan their brains, there's going to be similarities, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. There's always like
It's
similarities between all of it,
it's
especially the
just
way
that
we word it.
autism is so, I think it
Vague.
intuitively makes sense to me that it's just the way it presents at like 3 months old.
But we
And
do theoreticals if you want to do that, like two theoretical like ideas, like philosophical theoretical. If that makes sense.
yeah, like the development of someone with autism is very different and
Always.
definable compared to the development of someone without
Not
autism.
always. Not true.
Not true?
No, high functioning autism is very hard to see, depending if the
Well,
kid
it's a
knows how to
spectrum.
just adapt. Yes, but that's what I mean. You're saying it very, like that statement is it's easy and it isn't easy,
Well, I'm
but it is.
saying
It's actually
like
more of a
I'm using
spectrum
the
that it's actually
extreme.
hard depending. Yeah. So if you're
I'm
using the
using the
extremes, I agree.
extreme.
Yeah.
I'm
If you're
saying
just
like,
only using the extremes, I agree.
yeah, the extreme, and then you can be less and less to the point where it's hard to
Yeah.
diagnose. But I'm saying it's
Yeah, and that's why also autism's the only thing left now for a diagnosis. They don't have Asperger's. They don't have PDD anymore. They don't have any of the other types of autism things because it was one thing just to make it more about funding, and then also to make it just a spectrum. But that also hurts the people that are harder to diagnose. The more that they know how to mask, or the more they fit into society, and that causes more harm because the
this
people that are high functioning get missed.
this guy's not a professional. Someone's
No,
asking where your understanding comes from.
it
He's
comes from
just
my life, my background,
a
and just
thoughtful
my
guy.
autistic
Neither of
that
us are
cares about it.
professionals. Neither of
Yeah,
us are professionals.
I'm just a layman.
Me too. Um,
Yeah. The layman that has a passion for
okay,
psychology
so
and understanding.
this person said that the fact that he is seeking a diagnosis makes it seem like he may be projecting his own label essentialism. Okay, this is why I was trying to stop you earlier, because we were just talking about how the diagnoses are very flawed and I was
Yes.
calling it a medicalization of psychology, which I think is impossible. But there are some things, and I don't think it's just autism. There are some things
Different
that
types of diagnosis. The
seem.
diagnosis you had wasn't full diagnosis.
There are
It
some
wasn't
things
a
that's
3-hour
there are
diagnosis and a
some
psych test.
there are some things that unlike ADHD, which is a cluster of attributes or behaviors, which we vaguely define as ADHD, and there's
Disorder.
a lot of reasons you can have those behaviors, and a lot of ways they can present or whatever, but they
Yeah.
can come from there's a bunch of different mechanisms in your brain that could cause those things to happen. In
I'm pretty sure ADHD is
autism,
also genetic, but yeah. I would say
autism,
ADHD and autism are the only two that I would say are genetic for sure,
I don't think
and the
ADHD is
rest we
genetic.
don't know for sure. I would say so
I
because
don't
it
think so.
seems like my whole family has ADHD, but we also all have trauma. So who knows? Maybe the trauma made it come out because they also say the gene won't represent until you have trauma. So maybe
You can't be selective so easily like this.
I know. I'm just saying that as like my perspective and my experience of people that I meet with ADHD. And
The only one I'm
a lot of it's
comfortable
gonna be
saying I believe is actually nature versus nurture is autism. The only one, but I think there are more.
Also research that I've read, but that's what I'm saying. Versus personality disorders, I think, are where symptoms that they just classify as something that doesn't actually fully represent or know. It's a personality disorder.
Well, like
Because of that, that's why there's a difference to the term in the name.
Yeah,
Versus ADHD is
personality.
more of like a disorder that you actually like a syndrome or disorder you have.
I don't-
like autism syndrome.
I don't
or
think autism is.
Asperger's syndrome.
I don't think autism is. I guess
It's
you
a
could
neurological
say
difference.
a difference. I honestly,
Yes.
I'm not even being woke.
Yeah, I would say
I'm
it's
wearing a
neurological
fucking. I'm wearing
difference.
just to be a fucking shitter. I'm wearing a hat that says, "Please be patient. I have autism. Please be patient. I have autism." So I'm not being woke when I say I don't think that autism is a disorder. I think it's just a different brain.
Yeah, I would agree.
I guess you could say that is sort of a disorder, but I think
And it goes to,
disorder.
like, it just
Disorder
disordered is a
means
difference.
absence
We
of
just use the
order.
word difference.
The order has been made unorderly, but
Yeah.
autism I say would be defined as the order of your brain is organized different.
Yeah, or you use more of your brain, or you use different amounts at different time. You're just a different brain. I would
Yeah.
agree to that. It's just a
And I'm
different
not
type
being
of
woke. That's what woke people say, and I'm not even trying to.
No, I would agree to that. I would agree that autism is a different brain, especially, or a different access to the brain, or a different amount of the brain, or you can even look at the MRI of like temple grandin versus a neurotypical, and
Someone
the
in
amount of
chat
like synapses
agreed-
and pathways that are very like
Someone in chat
like,
agreed with you.
abstract everywhere.
Someone in chat agreed with you that ADHD is a neurological disorder and not a
Yeah.
psychological. That's a good distinction. Neurological disorder versus
that's what I was thinking.
psychological disorder. I will
I think everything in
consider it.
psychology is personality disorders. Those are the things that are not usually like. Those are where like we have the mess and the muddiness that I think doesn't need to be there.
I
And it
feel
causes
like
a lot of problems.
ADHD could be psychological.
I don't think it is. I think it is actually proven that it is like neurological, and it's genetic.
But the
Even
proof,
if like let's say
the
like
proof-
bipolar, which would be another neurological difference. Say that a bipolar person only shows their manic side or mania when they're under severe distress, and then they finally show like mania, but then they go back to being calm, and it's a way their mind self-defends to make sure that they don't like kill themselves, or sorry, like in a video game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like you could see how like there might be a few neurological disorders that or genetics that some people might have, and then that will make them act and be different with the personality disorder. And those personality disorders are useless. I think those are like what causes all the harm and muddiness of people being misdiagnosed and being looked at incorrectly instead of looking at the neurology of the person.
They're all the same thing. They're all
They're not.
trauma.
There's a difference between a personality disorder and neurology.
No, that's what I'm saying. All the personality disorders are trauma.
Yeah. I agree.
They manifest different, and it's just so vague.
Like a BPD person, like if you want me to give examples of how they could seem the same thing, an autistic person could seem BPD when they're having an autistic meltdown or shutdown.
Yeah.
And like
Because
lashing,
it's
like
not-
flipping out and asking for help, and they're just being super intense in front of someone.
Okay,
But
so
the other person doesn't understand it, so then it looks like they're being too much, or being like out of the norm.
Someone said social media and internet in general has pretty much given everyone ADHD. I believe
That may be, yeah.
I
To some degree.
believe that the evidence that you quote unquote said that exists for and I'm not a professional,
Yeah, I don't know where it is
but I
anyway. I have to
believe
find
that
it.
the evidence that you're saying exists is no different from the evidence that that proves that trans
Like
people are
dopamine receptors.
born with brains, like a trans woman is born with a woman's brain in a man's body, and the evidence is that trans women's brains have similarities to women's brains as opposed to men's brains if you do an MRI.
Yeah.
But I believe that if you have people with similar lifestyles and similar behaviors and similar like if you're living the same, I bet you could do a
Person
brain
felt
scan.
accepted.
I bet you could do a brain scan on coal miners,
Yeah.
and I bet coal miners' brains would look different from people who aren't coal miners because
Well,
they're all
it could.
fucking coal mining.
Well, it could, yes, especially because of the chemicals they deal with.
No, that's not what I mean. Okay,
Well, there
anything
would be signs of that as well. So
software
there would be
engineers,
also that too. Yeah.
software engineers, their brains.
Yes.
I would bet you $5,000 that if we
Yes.
did a big study and scanned the
But
brains
that's
of
also a
software
known thing that
engineers
most
and we
autistic
and we
people
no,
are
I'm
software
saying and we
engineers.
sampled out and we controlled for autism.
Okay.
I bet you, and I'm not actually making this bet because I don't have $5,000, but if I had money to
I don't
bet,
have anything
I bet
either.
you $200. Okay,
I don't got
and
it
it's
either.
not gonna happen. But if we did have this magical study somehow, or
Yeah.
then I bet you could prove that people who do software controlling for other factors tend to have similar brains, and I think it's by virtue of them doing software that makes them have a different brain.
Maybe. Or maybe that's just like what they enjoy. Or maybe what their brain's good at. So I would agree with it in that
I
way.
believe
But I
that
would
your
maybe
brain
go
gets good
this
at it. I believe
let
that you're born
yeah, I would agree with
fairly.
that. But let me just say like a thesis, like not a thesis, but like a hypothetical that we can say because I think it's like useful to
Mhm.
the situation and gives a different perspective. So think of this world, like if this world we just didn't have any of the info we have of autism or anything. We just have the idea of like Temple Grandin's work with like the 3 different thinking styles. How do we know that we don't have like a pie chart of 3 different thinking styles that make up the whole population? And that we have 33 like 33%, 33%, 33% are all making up the world, and that's like the different mind styles that are just autism, and autism might just be humanity. That's just like one theoretical world that could be going on. So that's why we have some people that are good at computers, some people are good at like physical things, like, and we would have different types of minds good at different things. But then when they meet each other, their differences make them like not understand each other perfectly, causes trauma, causes miscommunication because their brains work differently. And a lot of psychology could come down to a thesis like this, or a thesis that, like like if you want me to go to a second one, like a different hypothetical, you want to like talk about this one first before I continue.
This one. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
My thesis is contrary to that. Well, not necessarily 100%. I think that everybody, I think that you can have propensities to your biology for your brain, just like you
Yeah,
can
and
have a
that you would reinforce it, like what
just
you're good
like
at.
you
You would
can
like
just
reinforce
wait
kind of
wait
thing.
let me finish. Just like you
Yeah,
could
my
have a
fault.
propensity to have lighter or darker skin, but I believe that our brains are so the development of a human brain is so um,
Long.
complicated, and
Yeah.
we develop our brains for such a long period of time, and maybe you have slightly a slightly thicker little part to your fucking specific segment of your brain
Yeah. Or
compared to
one side
someone
just works
else
harder.
from
Yeah.
birth, from genetics.
Yeah.
That part can be used in a completely different way than another person by virtue of your development, such that it doesn't even matter very much whatsoever what your physical, biological propensities are for your brain, because our brain is shaped and molded so profoundly by our childhood and our experiences.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just like if you see someone lose brain matter in their brain, like an accident, their
And then
brain
they,
will learn to conform to like the other
yes,
parts of the brain and use it.
exactly.
It's a part of my thesis, so I agree. I just haven't
Yeah,
written it down right.
I
Put it
find
down
that
yet.
that's basically the thing that makes me
Yeah.
feel so strongly that you
That's
like.
why I say like CBS and AD, like Alzheimer's and CBS, might be ways that we can track this from childhood. Because maybe there's a track of like there's a bit of that brain and that side, like the like, executive functioning of an ADHD person lacking would be more like CBS or AD, and you could see how their brain adapts around that because it has issues there to then learn how to communicate differently using the other parts of the brain, and that's what causes miscommunication and them speaking different.
Mhm.
So I agree to that because like that's why I've always been very much either over communicating and saying too much so people can understand me better. I give as much context as possible, or I do a lot of reflecting listening and asking questions and what do they mean to make sure that I fully understand them. And I've always done that since I was a kid, and I always analyze everything. But that's how my mind has always been a
Okay,
way for me to adapt to society,
I got a
even
tough
though I
question for
might be
you.
different. Yeah.
So you believe that autists are more are hyper empathetic and more empathetic than most people.
From research and from my own experience, yeah.
Okay, okay.
At least
How
emotionally
does that
empathetic.
how does that intersect with the, I would say, fact? You tell me if I'm wrong. You would know more about autism than me. I'm gonna say fact though. How
Yeah.
does that intersect with the fact that autistic people tend to be much worse at seeing through deceptive behavior?
I don't know. I think that's completely different. There's a synapse that's disconnected in autistic people that like is supposed to go to the prefrontal cortex, and it comes down to them like having their self-defense mechanisms coming up very quickly. I've always never been very defensive. I've always been very willing to have any type of conversation, and I'll like stay in a conversation even if it's like a negative one. Uh,
Is this a negative one?
I'm no, I'm just saying in general, just as like general statements. So if that's true, because that's actually like something that can be seen in the mind, that would cause them to like be naive or be like like they wouldn't care about protecting and like looking for red flags. They'd be way too like willing to jump in front of like an oncoming train in that type of sense, if that makes sense. Like a burning car fire of a person. Because they don't like instantly go to red flags or self-defense mechanisms like the neurotypical mind, and that would go to that like synapse that's disconnected. I have to find the exact one because I haven't like went and looked up the research just because of being lazy. But it's like one part I think in the prefrontal cortex or right behind that, and it goes all the way to the back of the mind to like your spinal cord.
Interesting.
So that would like explain that.
But that, I think that defines me, and I don't think I'm autistic.
Well,
I
you
think
could
that
be
I
wrong.
put myself in the, I think that I put myself not necessarily the synapses, but I will.
Seem to. You put
I'll
yourself in
see.
what?
I will see the red flags, but out of empathy and out of like connection, I think that when I see the red flags, my response to seeing the red flags, and I know they're there,
You don't
is
listen.
often, and I don't. Maybe this is like, I don't know how I feel about this,
Yeah, like
but
you're still thinking it through, or
no
you
no
have to
no no
reflect on
no.
it maybe more.
I don't. I am aware of this behavior. I don't know how I feel about it. I'll see the red flags, and my response is to be more open and more vulnerable, in order to, in the other person, disarm
Become
them
more.
from
Yeah,
from
I totally
and
understand that.
I don't think that is not being able to see through deception, but I do think that I put myself in the path of train, and I think that I'm
Yeah, and you
extra
might be
vulnerable to sociopathic behavior.
yeah, and you might be deceived more, or you might have people deceive you more, or people like disappear on you, or whatever. Even though you're being extremely nice and understanding and empathetic and over like
I don't think
over
I'm.
charitable, you might
I don't
have
think I'm
people
deceived. I'm just
disappear.
hurt more.
Yeah, but what is deceived then? Because you're saying deceived is like something that we know it's happening. I don't know if anyone knows deceived. I can see patterns in people. I can see when they're lying. But doesn't mean that like I'll still probably talk to the person and try to help them. Like
Okay,
I
I'm
could meet
thinking
someone
of
that's actually very narcissistic, and I'll still talk to them and try.
I'm thinking of Chris Chan, and how he. Are you familiar with Chris Chan at all?
I know like
Okay,
kind of
okay.
like
I'll
through
just
the meme, but I don't know him well.
okay. There's
And
a
also, I
guy.
don't know if he still lives, so I don't know if we should talk about
He,
it, just because it might relate to his mental health. Like it might
he's in
relate to
jail. He's
affecting
in
him.
jail now.
Okay.
But I don't like going too much in depth on stream about him. But I made a video about him, and I didn't drag him through the dirt like a lot of people do. But I went over the ways he was abused, and
Yeah.
and one of the things that happened was people would pretend that they were his girlfriend because he was very lonely and wanted a girlfriend,
Yeah.
and they would lie to him for like months and pretend that, and he would be completely in love, and they'd convince him to do crazy shit. That would be an inability to see through deception, and he did it. They did it over and over again. This is like
But
9 or 10 times.
yeah, yeah.
He
But
kept
like, let's
falling
look at
for it.
again. Autism is a spectrum, so a high functioning person might not be deceived as easily because they're closer to the norm.
Right. I think that
So with him,
the
he might
low
be way more
functioning.
to like the low functioning.
Yeah, he called himself
So
high
that would be a
functioning,
way
but
of like, yeah, he might be high functioning
higher
more
than
than others
yeah.
because there's some that'll just sit there and just not talk to people at all and just groan and make noises and like flap. So people can be very low functioning when it comes to autism. But
Okay,
it's a spectrum. So if
someone
we
in
look at it as
chat.
a spectrum, it can be that he was more deceived than other people.
Right, right. I got you. Someone in chat said autistic people can't identify those threats. It's not that they can't react to them. It's not just that they can't react to them, it's that they can't identify the threats.
It's kind of complicated because again, how does you actually like? It depends on like IQ. It depends on where you are on the spectrum. It depends on a lot of things. So is that necessarily fully true for
But
all autistic people?
the
Maybe, maybe
IQ,
not.
but yeah, but we're talking about the autism is a spectrum, and I think that if we're talking
It's like
about
EQ and IQ are spectrums that also are in people.
yeah, but
If you have all
EQ and
three of those,
IQ are not
and
real.
also, what do
You
you mean
know,
they're not real? They're well,
they're
they're
just
data. Like yeah, that's a way that we can like try to get some type of data on a person's intelligence to a certain degree, or it's like a quota that we try to use. But I'm saying that we can still use it as a data point, but not use it as something that's like completely a rule or factual. But it's something you can still use to analyze something. So it's not something that we just have to throw out just because it's not completely perfect. Just like most factual information, if you look at statistics in any way, isn't perfect. You can look at stats and be very debate bro-y and be completely wrong on a subject because you're looking only at the numbers, but you're not looking at the bigger picture. It's complicated.
someone says
like-
I saw the world more logically because of autism.
Yeah,
I see
I
it
would agree
that
with that.
way even more so now because I've been thinking that way in my career for 2 decades, reinforcing those pathways.
Yeah, I
That's
would
what I'm
agree.
saying
And that's
with
the same with autistic people that are emotional and more creative. They would be doing the opposite. And that would create a different type of person that's way different from the logical autistic person, like the visual
Mhm.
thinker. So it could be very different how we change through time, especially that it takes 25 years for our brains to fully develop. In that time, with all the experiences we have, we can have different things that we reinforce because like, oh yeah, I've always liked video games. I've always liked little puzzles. I've always liked solving things. And by puzzles, I don't mean actual puzzles, but I like solving like a case or solving something. So my mind is reinforced by me looking for that. Plus, it gives me dopamine when I do it. So the ADHD side of me is also like always looking for things like that, like little knickknacks or something to like.
Someone
solve.
said in chat, and tell me if you agree. I this is my impression. One of the things that defines autism is the degree to which you can't read social cues.
Social cues are complicated. That's the best way I could say it. It's complicated. I can read some social cues, and I don't know how much is that me training my mind to pay attention to social cues because of me noticing times when I couldn't notice the social cue. How much of it's when you say something so vague about autism like that, and then you do more research about it, it's super complex. So it's a lot of like the research goes against its own research when it comes to autism. It's a spectrum of research. The way you even have to look at it, every piece of like research is on a spectrum. Every statement is on a spectrum. So nothing is black and white. Nothing can be used as black and white. The only way you could actually solve if someone has autism is an MRI scan. If you want to be super concrete because of how complex it can be. Like House and Sherlock were both written after a friend of like the writer that had Asperger's. That's what House and Sherlock are. There's someone with Asperger's. It was a doctor that he knew. So that is like high functioning autism. But then when you look at someone that's on the other side of the spectrum, they can be completely different. And how much of that comes down to someone being extroverted or introverted? Someone that's introverted might not want to meet people, might not want to communicate with people, might not understand social cues because they don't care about like meeting people or talking to people. But someone that's an extroverted autistic person, they'll be more talkative, more around people, have more more pattern recognition and more understanding of how people act. It's complex. That's why when I even had discussions with Max about this, I would always like hate that he was always asking me yes or no's because I could never answer a yes or no because it's like,
Don't talk
Max,
about him on my stream.
I'm only talking about him in that way. I'm not going into the psychology or anything like that. I'm just talking about something that was on stream with me. So it was just, you'd only ask yes or no's. So it made it just so I couldn't talk to him and actually convey my full message because I can't answer those questions as just black and white. But he kept forcing them to be black and white.
House is a variation of someone with Asperger's who can read social cues.
And his whole experience is pretty much hating being alive. And then he goes to heroin. Which would also show how a lot of autistic people might, become homeless, might become going to drugs, have like type of coping mechanisms of like, fuck it.
Yeah, I don't like it's complex.
You don't like that I say it's complex? Well,
everything.
complex
You say everything's complex.
Yeah,
but
my mind looks at things like very complex. It looks
I
at it with a lot of context.
but I think a lot of times you muddy the water. I think that if you're going to talk about autism, which is a spectrum, and it can present in different behaviors,
so it spectrum can be muddy.
It can present in I think it can yes.
Yes.
As far as an individual, as far as an individual is concerned, yes.
It should represent as muddy if it is a spectrum. It will be different in everyone, and it will show different in everyone. All the symptoms will be also very complex. So it will be a muddy subject.
I think that if it's a spectrum,
it can't be black and white. If it's an on and off switch, it could.
No, I'm not saying it should be black and white. I'm saying it's a spectrum. I just said it.
Yeah, but then you say
let's say that it's a linear spectrum, and it can go from 100% autism to 0% autism.
Say neurotypical to atypical.
How
it kind of is.
Yeah, so that's what it seems like. So if you want to describe autism, you should describe 100%.
Yes, but then how do you do that about one human mind when a mind is complex?
So if you're going to describe autism, you should describe it not as someone who is 30% autism. You should describe it as someone who's 100% autism.
Yeah, but then you miss everybody that's in the 50%.
No, because they're shades of gray closer to not autism.
Yeah, so then it would be muddy.
But if we're describing the thing itself,
entire spectrum instead of just talking about the outline, like the worst condition. You can't just talk about just because then the people that are like actually high functioning in society that don't get help fall in through the cracks and don't get help.
I don't think that I'm letting them fall through the cracks. I'm saying it's a spectrum.
From my experience, I know that me and other people that I've met in life do fall through the cracks.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's a spectrum, and if we're describing, we should talk about the far end of the spectrum so that we can accurately talk about it.
But then you can't accurately talk about it. You need to talk about each part of the spectrum. You need to talk about all the colors, not just one color. So if black or white, we should talk about the grays as well.
If it is colors, then what you're doing is you're saying, because this is my other thought that I was thinking, was if it's colors, then you're saying it's not a linear spectrum. It is a tri-point spectrum. If it's colors,
if we go off of like tone of colors, like black through white,
value.
Grays.
Okay, then that's a linear spectrum.
Yes,
so it can't be colors because colors so when I mean means
colors,
it's 3 points.
Gray is a different color. We call it a different color. So I was using it maybe colloquial or shade. That's the better way. But yes, there'll be different shades.
Yeah, so
you have to talk about the shades.
Black to white. And
you can't just talk about the black. or just the white.
If you talk
You
about
have
the
to talk
white,
about the
if you
shades.
talk about the black and talk about the white, you can talk about how close to white you are and how close to black you are. But
No,
if every
and
time you
if you
talk
don't know
about,
that the
if every
shades
time,
represent very complicatedly, and you can't tell the difference between them, and it becomes very muddy, then you have to talk about the shades, or you get people falling through the cracks because
if you
they're
talk,
being missed.
so
It
okay,
is
so if you
known that a
talk
lot of
about,
people are misdiagnosed with autism. It is known, especially high functioning.
I don't think that has to do with what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you have to talk about black and you have to talk about white in order for people to color mix and get any point in between. If you talk about 55% gray and white, then that means that the
We
people who are
talk
the
about
black end
different.
will fall
We
through.
have to talk. We have to talk about all of it. You want to talk about just the black on one end. I'm saying we need to talk about the entire shades.
Yeah, but every time we talk
Some
about
people will be
anything specific, you say that it's too
because my
complex.
message is more towards, yes, I'm saying it's too complex because we have to talk about each shade. So if you want to talk about a specific shade right now, let's talk about a certain shade. Where in the spectrum do you want to talk about?
Well,
When
then
it's
if it's
severe
not,
or when it's
it's
like not
not,
severe?
it's not where in the spectrum. It's which individual. And I'm
Yes,
talking about it
yes,
in a
because it's
way
gonna
that
be,
isn't individual.
well, it's kind of, you're talking about a thing that exists in humanity and is just a human condition of a different type of mind that is going to be different to each type of human mind that is in that condition. And it's going to represent differently because of their experiences and everything. So how can you do that without talking about people and individuals or different people at different points of the spectrum? You have to kind of use different spectrum places and different people as like reference points so people can understand the story. That's why even in my thesis, I'm hoping that I get other people's perspectives to come and tune in. So it's more of like the people's theory versus just my own thesis. I'm hoping people will try to either help challenge me on my logical reasoning and also give their perspectives of their life.
I think perspectives are good. Hearing lots of
Yeah,
stories is good.
yeah. But it's complicated. That's why I say it's complicated because it's going to be multiple shades. You can't just say black, white. Yes, like you can see it, like the people that are very severely autistic are already getting it. And that's why the autistic spectrum already got limited down to just autism. And they removed other conditions like PDD, I believe it was. I forget what the other one was. And then there's like two other ones I can't remember the names or the like abbreviations. And then Asperger's. They're all gone from the DSM-5
Someone just said,
because of funding.
someone who's basically saying all the same points that you're saying. Just said that my description is evidence of me having executive. My description of describing a spectrum by talking about both ends in order to encompass the whole spectrum, which you disagree with, and that's fine. This person said that that is proof of me having executive functioning issues.
Maybe. I would just say it's more that you're just looking at it very black and white. But you're not noticing how you're missing the people that might be harder to see that are more in the middle because they don't represent with the symptoms as hard. Or they've learned to mask. That's why autistic masking is a term.
Hmm. Yeah.
So the middle of the spectrum is way harder to diagnose or to even notice that they have the diagnosis. And a lot of people
But
don't even know they have the diagnosis.
autistic masking could look like anything.
Exactly. That's why it's say.
So
Why
how
that's
do
why
you
I give
talk
a
about
short
it?
answer is it's complex.
No, it's not that
So
it's
that's why
complex. It's not that it's complex. It's that it's unique to every single. It's not.
yes.
You
But it's
overuse the
also
word complex. I said this at the beginning. It's not that it's, in my
So then
opinion.
what would
In
you
my
like me to
opinion.
answer?
In my opinion. But you can.
Yes.
In my opinion, it's not that it's complex. It's that it is unique to
You want
every
to go
single
deeper on that
individual.
topic? I can go deeper on that topic, but then I don't have a concise, quick answer for you. So do you want a back
Well,
and forth now that's concise, like not concise, going more into the complex? Either going into my experience or going into other people's experience.
okay. Let's talk about autistic
people have seen.
masking. Let's talk about
Yeah.
autistic masking.
There you go. Is that helpful? All right. So what do you want to go into with autistic masking? And
So,
how it like represents in my own life, or
well, if you want, how can you talk about autistic masking? Like, show me how you could talk about it as a specific point on the spectrum.
I don't know if I could say it as a specific point because I don't know. I feel like
That
I'm very
was
in
my
the middle of the
point.
spectrum. I
You
could say
can't.
myself, I think I'm in the middle of the spectrum. Yeah, but that doesn't matter. Like that point doesn't matter. That's just a stopping point so we don't have a conversation. It's just being like
So, what does it look like for you?
for like autistic masking.
Yeah.
This is where it's going to be like I can't even tell where my mask starts or ends. It's complex as shit, but I can go deep into it and we can talk about it. So I say complex here, but I will go
Okay.
deeper.
So how
Um,
so you know that you do in some ways. So how are you able to determine what
it is
behaviors you
hard for
have
me to
that are
know
masking?
who is me and who is the mask. And I'm recently I went through like a phase of finally like just ripping off most of my mask, if you want to call it that, and understanding who truly I am. That I don't care about the societal norm as much. I don't care about how people view me as like awkward or weird or speaking too robotic. I'm more me. I don't speak and
Mhm.
mask and act like other people or mimic as much just so to fit in or so I don't have like chaos in my life or like to be avoided
Hell yeah.
because they avoid me anyways, so it doesn't matter. Because of like
Yeah.
my differences in the way I speak, it's already causing inconsistencies even if I can mask perfectly and act like others.
Fuck them.
So I'm more myself and more just what do you call it? But that took me 33 years to get to, and a lot of it I used to be comfortable I think with myself, but the more I had trauma, the more it made me go back into masking or back into not knowing who I was because I was psychoanalyzing myself through how people viewed me or perspectives or how people treated me, and then I didn't have enough context. So I didn't know what happened in those situations. So it made me misread the situation or not know enough of the body language or whatever. I could feel that they were in distress, but if I mentioned that they're in distress, they would just say they're not in distress because it's awkward to talk about distress. And humans in societal norms don't like talking about emotion. So it's super complex. That's why I say it's complex because we have to like pick a concise topic of it and go deeper on the autistic mask. It's like we have to go to like pieces
Well,
of the mask.
you're saying that you can't know, right?
It's to a degree you can't know because it's like it's a part of your brain or the way that you do actions that you don't know how much of you is you and how much is the mask. That's how people refer to it even when they talk
Mm-hmm.
about autistic masking.
Someone in chat just said I worked in a mental hospital with heavily autistic people who were unable to speak or
Yeah,
touch or
nonverbal.
be touched
Yeah,
by people, and it gives them a very different perspective. I'd be interested in what is different about your perspective in that
I've
case.
hated being touched as well. I'm a Portuguese background, so my family's very Portuguese. First generation of being Portuguese, like a Portuguese American. So I'm the first one born in America,
Mm-hmm.
and they're very touchy people. They're very loud people. They're very like huggy. Everything. Ever since I was a kid, I never liked being touched. I didn't like being hugged. It would like overwhelm my body. It would be overstimulating. So I would just be running away from people screaming, and they just thought it was funny, cute little kid thing of him just running and like being in fear, trying to hide away from people under tables and stuff. But I literally did not want to be hugged or kissed or touched by people because it like overstimulates me. I
Mm-hmm.
have weird like things that I'm only comfortable with like certain people touching me, or it like overstimulates my body.
You know what's something
So
that
it
gets
doesn't
me?
represent the same. Yeah,
Sound. Like
yeah. Loud noises are bad for me too,
I'm fine with just loud
especially
noises, but
frequencies.
yes, okay, yes. I hate when someone is like vacuuming for like 2 hours or something.
Yeah,
If it's me, it's fine, but like someone else, it's like, oh, Jesus, fuck, get out of my life, like stop. Or like someone like doing road
or it
work outside or
irritates you.
something.
It makes you angry, like intensely like aggravated, almost.
Yeah, I can
Like
get over it,
overwhelms you.
but I don't
Yeah,
like
but I
it.
mean like it kind of like yeah, but it agitates your mind. Is the
Yes,
way I would say it. It wouldn't make you like necessarily punch people or kill people or whatever. I'm just saying
right.
you feel agitated in that moment and feeling like distress almost. But it's hard to even see, and that's why I would say that would be like the same thing with me, and especially even on Discord when there's a lot of loud noises and like frequencies that are like very different. If I'm in a channel with a lot of people talking, that can cause me like anxiety and distress from just
Mm-hmm.
that. So that's like some ways you could see how my mind is different. That's not a mask. That's just ways that my mind gets stimulated differently than others. But again, it's complex. So how many people's minds are like that? Doesn't seem like everyone is, but how many do we know are like that or not? But we never look at autism as like a spectrum that we actually analyze people through and care about as like the main thing to look through. Where we should be looking
You
there
know,
first.
I feel like my aversion to the sound of a vacuum or road work is very trauma oriented,
With like
and
what?
just experiences negatives. Like I can remember not being affected by that kind of thing, but lately I am, and I feel like, and this is just a bullshit professional Smith bullshit theory.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
I feel like because autistic people's brains are slightly wired different. Their response to certain stimuli is not inherent that they're going to respond that way, but it often results in a traumatic experience, which then causes
Can be reinforced.
yes,
Like as their mind gets more reinforced to that experience, it can maybe get stronger. Like your sensitivity could improve.
Mm-hmm.
But again, how do we know? That could just be how our mind, like, it's complex. See, like, so it could be a thing that could be through experience. It could come from like over time. How much of this can be something that our mind becomes more like that with age? Yes, that's why it's hard to talk about it, because all of autism is vague. It's just like a vaguism, like description, but we can see it in like an MRI, but we don't talk about it using MRIs or anything like that. We don't even diagnose it that way.
Someone else said they can relate to the hitting the sound of the vacuum, and it comes from trauma. There's a lot of us that were chased like dogs by the vacuum, I guess.
Yeah, but are you just cats then?
Yeah.
Are you cat people? Like you're human cats?
Yeah. Don't call me a pussy. Like...
That wasn't what my goal was. I was just saying, actually, like, are you just a furry or something?
Oh no, I didn't know you were call me a furry. Jesus Christ, I'd rather be a pussy than a furry.
Maybe you're both. But yeah, it's like one of those things that my father was like the same way, that like noises would make him just very irritated very quickly. And he would be like very on edge. Like it would just kind of like make the hairs on his head like stand up or whatever.
That probably was traumatic for you too.
No, I just didn't know why it would like be such a thing. But then I noticed I also had that same thing in me. As I like went through life, I noticed it happened to me in the same way of just like, hey, these noises, not the same noises, just different noises, would cause me to just be intense. And my dad wasn't like someone that would flip out. He would just become like stressed, and I could tell he'd become stressed. He was a very pussy type man. He was not, what do you call it? He would be more like the mother than the father in the like in the parenting role. He was not like the type to be like a screaming, like, what do you call it, drunk belligerent man type like figure. So he never was like screaming. He would just become tense and stressed, and I could tell when like I had my headphones like blaring music when I was a teenager and I was just sitting in the car near him. He would just become like stressed out, and I could tell. Like it would just be too much information or like too stimulating, or like the frequencies would like distract him or something.
Yeah, my dad has similar. Someone chat saying people seem to have forgotten there's a psychiatric definition of these terms, and the lighter versions most people identify with because it resembles their own private psychology. Thing is, the gap between the two is huge, like night and day.
Between the two of what?
Between
neurotypical and atypical?
Yeah.
I would say it comes muddy when you're in the middle. How can you really know when you get to the middle? Because then it's going to be, you're kind of both of them, or you're representing as both, or you're masking as both, or it gets way more complex.
I've
Especially because we have to look at it as a spectrum. Not
just on a side on like on the just psychology, up to that contention I have with our understanding of psychology.
Yeah, as in ours, like when you, or ours as people.
When we say that things are hereditary, I've had experiences with my family and my parents. I remember when we moved to this house, the kitchen's very small, and my dad used to like hate it when I was in the kitchen when he was trying to like put away something or like cook something. He's like, get out of the kitchen. And that, it wasn't a behavior I had until then. But ever since that started happening, now I hate being in the kitchen with anybody. And he noticed that I was getting that behavior from him. And it's sort of an antisocial behavior. It's like nobody can be in the kitchen with me. Yeah, and so he's like, he's like, oh shit, I've had this impact on my son. So he's like, no, you can be in the kitchen with me. I need to. We can't have you.
We can't have you antisocial in the kitchen.
But I think about that situation when I hear people say that like ADHD is hereditary for sure. We've seen it go. No, but the behavior itself doesn't mean it's biologic. Hereditary can be learned.
Yeah, maybe we don't know though.
But hereditary can be learned for sure.
We can say maybe, How about we say maybe instead of saying yes?
Well, no, I'm saying it can be, but that we don't know if it is in
Yeah,
any
so like just
individual.
maybe. Yeah, so just say maybe.
It
We both
can be.
agree at maybe. Yeah, so just maybe. We don't know for sure on either end if it's only hereditary in the sense of genetics
I'm
or if
not
it's
saying it was only. I'm
learned
saying it
only.
can be.
Yeah, yes, I know. That's what I'm just saying. We both agree at maybe.
I saying can be.
I think you're missing the point.
Um,
Um,
I heard that recent research is splitting autism into two different disorders. One is the extreme kind, where they can't speak and communicate, and the other is the social kind.
I haven't heard this. I have seen that there's been new studies coming out that have some similarities to things I've been talking about, but I haven't seen anything with that specific. So I
It's
would like
interesting.
to see the study. If you want, you can reach out to me and send it to my
Yeah,
Discord.
post it in chat
It's in,
by the end of this. We'll
yeah, or
probably wrap up soon, but
you can PM
um,
me like if you see me in the Smet, then you can just
yeah,
send it directly to me.
it's
Or Cakeflakez
cake
pound
flakes.
6126 is my Discord.
Someone said the gap. This person that said they worked in a mental institution.
Yeah,
They said that the gap between the two is so huge, it's not even a spectrum anymore. Most likely different conditions at the very least. And this is not someone knowing this for fact, it's from their personal experience of.
yeah. Are they saying between neurotypical and atypical? 'Cause I still don't know what
They're
they're
saying
referring to as the two. Like or
between the
Asperger's and autism.
they're saying between the people who are extremely low functioning and the people
Yeah.
who are like muddy.
So like Asperger's and like autism, like deep autism, or low functioning and high functioning.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would hope, but the problem is that the DSM-5 is not doing. So what we use for psychology is going the opposite way, and it's removing all the other labels or the other things that would actually help people get diagnosed that have Asperger's or other things. Instead, they don't exist anymore, and now we just have
This
autism.
person just said, I feel like and I mean this is just their feeling.
Yeah.
I feel like more people these days self-diagnose online, read some psychology articles or sites, and decide if it's what they got. Shopping for disorders labels, and like
One.
some others go for gender.
Yeah.
It's
I
an
understand that whole
identity.
thing.
Do
Yeah,
you think
I
that
understand that.
autism could be an identity?
I don't know. I don't think so. When it comes to psychology and that type of thing, I don't agree to like the whole gender stuff. So that's just where I am with that. I think that's a more complex thing that is kind of weird, and I don't understand why that whole thing exists. It just seems like a weird societal norm.
Hmm.
But I just don't agree to the whole system that they've come up with. But when it comes to psychology, I think when it comes to me and my own experience with autism and my own understanding of my own mind, you're gonna know your mind better than anyone that can analyze you in a couple of appointments. So why it's way different when it comes to like physiologic like physical problems with your body where like you don't know how your leg works or you don't know the muscles of your leg. You know the intricacies of your mind and you know your experiences and you know all the information and all the data of your own mind. So it makes a lot of sense to know your mind more than someone else. That's what I would say. So it's kind of complex there. Doesn't mean that you can't misdiagnose yourself or you can't come up with like the wrong things that seem like it. Like back in the day, I used to be like, I feel like I'm kind of OCPD, which is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. And I was like, I think I'm this around when I was like 22. I'm like, but I'm not sure. I just felt like, yeah, I feel like this is me, kind of. I know I have ADHD, but this seems like kind of me. I do seem different than everybody. But then when I like finally found autism, I was like, that's me. That is me. It wasn't like shopping. It was just like eureka. I finally have an answer that like explains me, explains
I
all
don't
this
like that. I don't like that at all.
yeah. Well, that's just how it's gonna be. That's like a normal experience for a lot of people with autism. That's just kind of how it is.
Maybe with
You're gonna
autism,
know yourself more than like other people.
I don't think that you can really know yourself like that. But I mean, I think that might be the
Why?
case with autism. I think that we are our everything that you see and everything you feel and everything you perceive is
So our
filtered
life.
through. It's filtered through you. And
Yes.
and there is no magical you behind the filter. You are the filter.
Yes.
And the filter cannot filter out the filter.
Yes. You can still challenge your biases. So if you're not someone that just like is delusional and just follows like one belief and follows it as a belief. I challenge the belief. I check the belief. This is one reason that I also feel like I'm gaslit all the time if I'm like autistic myself, because people not understanding that I have autism. It's like an experience of always having that, because like people don't understand what autism is or how I'm different. So then I'll always be challenging myself, like, am I this? And that added to the whole masking problem as well. Where then I would over mask or mask more because then I'm like, it's all in my head or I'm just wrong. So I'm always challenging myself or checking if I'm delusional. That's always been a
Well,
fear of mine, of becoming
what's wrong
delusional.
with masking? I mean,
You
I'm not
hide
saying
yourself. You're not being yourself. So it causes a
Yeah,
bunch
okay.
of distress that you're faking yourself. You're living a facade, pretty much.
I respect that.
So it's like very distressful because you're like not being allowed to be you.
Yeah, I
It's
can
almost
get
like
that.
being like under like a prison of life.
It also could be the case that it helps people. I'm not sure. I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel
People
like
what?
some masking could be learning specific skills.
Yeah, masking can be helpful. Masking can be good for me just to have a conversation with someone that's different from me or be comfortable, like make people comfortable around me so then they'll talk to me. It can have like upsides to it. That's why people mask. But
Hmm.
that's the problem with masking, and that's why masking is like such a hard thing to even see, because it's something that we learn as a skill as well. As a way of like, that's why me, if I like got diagnosed as a child, which I did have symptoms as a child of autism, but it wasn't noticed by my family because my mom just looked at it as like, oh, my son's perfect, you know, the like normal mom thing
Hmm.
of like, there's nothing wrong with my boy. Instead of looking at it that way, that never happened. So then I just learned how to fit in. Like I even have experiences of my uncle telling me how I should talk to people so I don't upset them when I was like 5 years old, and me learning things from people around me or from me like watching and mimicking people. And because of me being extroverted and all that also helped. But I remember like specific conversations with my uncle that really helped me in like masking. Because he would just be like, hey, you just need to, like, I know you like video games, Andy, but you shouldn't talk about them with people that don't like them. You should, like, you know, talk about what they like and ask them questions. So that's how I
Is that
learned to,
really
like, reflective listen.
is that really masking, or is that learning a skill?
It's complicated. It's how do you rip them apart?
Well, masking would be
Like, some people in,
to
like,
hide
when
who
you
you
talk about,
are.
yes, but then that means I wouldn't be, like, hyper-focused talking about my, like, passion of, like, video games with people and just being, like, overstimulating, being like, ah, yeah, I love this video game, I'm playing this video. I'm not doing that. I've learned to, like, hey, I need to turn this off. Because if I don't, people will avoid me.
Hmm.
So I hide myself. But I would rather be the other one where it is me. The other one's like a fake me that I'm just putting on a mask. So it's
Well, I mean,
complicated.
I feel like that's a skill that
It's complicated.
non-autistic people have too, but we learn it easier.
Maybe. But how do we know?
Well, I have that skill and I learned it.
Yeah, but how do you know where you are on the spectrum? If we look at it as just a
I don't know.
spectrum, everyone's on the spectrum. Where would you be?
I don't know, but
Exactly.
I do know that
So how would you know that you don't
I
have
learned
any
that
autism in
skill.
you?
I don't know, but I
Yeah.
do know I learned that skill.
Yeah. But you're saying that that means that skill means now you're normal, is the way you're referring to it there.
No, I'm not saying
How
I'm
do you know?
normal or not. I'm not saying I'm normal.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm
but
not
just
normal.
saying,
Well, I did say I was normal,
uh,
but maybe I'm not. But I'm just saying that
yeah.
I don't. I think that
You get what I mean? It's more complicated.
I think
More, you don't even know. Nobody knows where they are on the spectrum. Say if everyone is on the autistic spectrum, some people might be at 10%, like neurotypical. Some people might be at 10% autistic, and everyone won't even know where they fully align. And this could cause up a lot of like the empathy problems in humanity as a whole. And that's what causes a lot of psychological problems or psychology problem, because psychology is just the study of humans. So if we're looking at it already incorrectly on the fundamental level, everything that follows is going to be flawed.
hmm Yeah, you can't know, but I think that could be
Something to
the
think
case
about.
that everybody learns that kind of skill, which is harder
Yeah.
for autistic people.
Yeah, maybe harder in the sense that they don't do it naturally, or they have to learn it, or they have to notice that it's a problem, or they have to have negative
Mm.
experiences to learn that they have to start doing, or they have to have some ways of doing it differently.
So
Like, hey, don't say
if
that 'cause that's
autistic
not.
people don't, if autistic, I really agree with your philosophy of, fuck it, just be yourself.
Yeah.
no more masking. I like that a lot. But
Yeah.
if it's the case that autistic people just naturally have difficulty learning these skills, and
Not all.
unmasking in that case is just
But let's say like not.
unlearning skills.
Maybe let's reword that sentence. It's not about learning the skills. It's that they might not need these skills or don't see purpose to the skills. So their brain doesn't see a purpose to them, but because the like societal norms or like the majority says these skills are normal and necessary, they begin to like conform and mask. Not all of them are capable of it, and some of them are more capable than others. Does that make more sense?
Yeah,
It's complex.
it's interesting.
That's why I say always it's complex.
It's not
after.
complex.
It has to be a
It's
very concise, like big statement than just like a very vague, like concise statement because then
it's
it misses
vague.
the spectrum. Yeah, but it has to be vague, but like more fitting and showing the whole like context
Someone said
versus like
this
saying like how you were saying it before with a short sentence.
the autistic person in the chat who was in heavy agreement with most of what you were saying has a. I'll just start saying their name so I can stop just introducing them like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Freet,
So it makes it easier.
Freet, said that masking is about what you don't do and not what you do.
Yeah. Which would like go to me saying like how I don't talk as much about the things that I like. I don't overstimulate someone with my like experiences. I like hide parts of myself.
Okay, yeah.
That I
So
would
in that
normally show.
case, okay, that's perfect because in that case, then I would say that we all learn to not do things. Men learn to not like, just like whip their dick out. I don't know, like, you know what?
Yeah,
You
like
know what's something? You know what's something interesting? Something that's autistic-y, spectrum-y that I do. Is I will like fucking stim myself when I'm sitting at my computer. And
Yeah,
now that
which
I have
again is also an ADHD thing too, so it's hard to
okay,
know because stimming is a
oh
part of both.
well, now that I have this fisheye lens, I can't just fucking stim myself because you'll see me. So
I see you playing with what do you call it, the weird metal thing
yes,
or whatever that.
yes,
I see
yes,
you doing that
yes,
as a
yes,
stimming
yes,
thing. That
yes.
you're trying to. I've noticed that pattern that you've been doing it. Because I at
Mhm.
first thought you were trying to put your hand up as like, hey, I need to speak for a second, but then I noticed you were just flicking that and running your finger on it as a way to like
Yeah.
distract your mind. Yeah, let me grab a drink real quick and I'll be right back.
All right,
I'm just gonna
all right,
reflect
all
on my
right,
fridge.
all right. He said doo. Yeah, it is this complex thing. It's complex thing is hard to pick apart. But it seems to remove nuance, not add to it. It reminds me of the gender conversation. I think that when, in my opinion, he says it's complex when it's when you say it's something's complex. For
Yeah, I need
me,
to stop doing that and we have to say like, where do you want to go deeper?
well, no, for me, my word of choice would be vague.
Yeah, but then it's not solving the problem or having a better conversation. So what we both need to do is I have to ask you to then ask me a better question or ask you to go deeper in a different like we have to go into a different I would have to give you like multiple choice then of like, oh yeah, autistic masking this and this. This is complex things that are part of this like vaguism or whatever you want to call it. And then we can go deeper into the topic in one way or another. But then instead of us just going to complex as the easy answer or vague.
Well, I think we've been going at it for like 2
Yeah,
hours.
I'm
so,
just saying, like in future conversations or whenever we have
Mhm.
conversations.
So is there anything else you think is important to talk about, or maybe you want to ask a question to the chat? Like, because you're working on your thesis here. What do you have anything you want to bounce off of me in the chat?
You can send the well. I'll send the link to like your whole Discord. I'll put like the general link. Anyone can
Right,
look
sure.
at the thesis. It's gonna be very abstract and very like rambly
Yeah,
and
it's
not like fully concise because it's like I'm only got like 30% of my brain down out of like 70%, like so 70%'s missing. But everyone can look at it. It's an open like G doc that
it's
anyone
early
can
stages.
comment on. Yeah, anyone can comment on. I'm taking very slow when I'm capable of like writing in it and like feel comfortable. I'll add to it. So it'll be here and there. You'll see more things being added, changed, whatnot.
I
A
got
lot of it is
some.
like not translated from how I speak or think in my mind, so it might be confusing.
I got some feedback from mental health professionals about your article.
Okay.
Um, but I just wrote down some brief notes. Um,
If you want to send it to me in like a pinned message.
it's not that much. I can just tell you.
Yeah, I
Or
just didn't so I could remember it, I guess. Or to
okay,
look back at
okay.
it, like so I can analyze it more.
They're not really very organized as far as because they didn't read your article. I read it and then I
Yeah.
went to my therapy session and I talked about it a little bit.
Yeah.
So Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy by Albert Ellis,
VBT?
REBT. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I referred to. That I think is a better style of therapy.
right. That's what someone was saying. I was describing what your philosophy was, and they told me that that sounded like that.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like I've always been doing REBT, and then I came to find out about it this year. But I've always acted through REBT and just naturally, just the way my mind psychoanalyzes stuff.
Right. I was telling my therapist. I was telling my therapist about you, and I said that I think that a lot of your philosophy is very CBT oriented,
It's
and REBT is sort of a downstream from CBT.
say it's REBT, but CBT seems more like I don't know. Maybe from my experience with CBT, that's where I'm getting the no. So I'm just gonna say my experience. I haven't done more research into CBT specifically. I just like talked to a professional, gone to my own professional for CBT, and it was a very negative experience. So like very pointless.
Mm-hmm.
So
All
that's
right. How about DBZ?
as in like Dragon Ball Z. What do you mean?
Yeah, that's what I thought. I wrote DBZ,
I never
and then I
heard of
wrote
DBZ.
under DBZ as a bullet point. I wrote radical acceptance.
Okay.
This is my. I don't know if I even wrote the right acronym, but the alternative to, Jesus Christ, the alternative to REBT.
Radical acceptance.
My philosophy would be my counter philosophy would be radical acceptance.
Yeah.
Which
You're saying towards my thesis, or like this is your own view towards my.
this is more towards our conversation we had before, where you're talking about
Yeah.
REBT basically.
I would agree to that.
And
with the
you're
whole
saying
radical
you're saying
acceptance.
you're saying that you can have your trauma and then you can cognate about your trauma afterwards and try to understand it and fix it.
Yeah.
My
understand yourself.
philosophy is radical acceptance of the trauma.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
cognition for me. It's just you just
But
accept
are
it.
you? Yeah, but accepting it, why? Like I guess you just accept it, and there's no thought process that helps you accept it, or no logic that helps you accept it, or no emotional reaction that helps you accept it. How do you accept it? Do you just say accept it because that's not going to help anyone? It's just too
Someone
vague.
said DBZ is great therapy. I don't know if they're joking or not.
I'm assuming just because of like them just saying the show is great therapy. Just watch like millions and millions of episodes of
I think that
a
you
build up to a fight.
if you expect to change something. Okay, so here's my. This is
I agree
my.
to the radical acceptance and the word radical acceptance.
This
but I
is
think
my.
that's a part of the process. It's not
This-
just
this-
one
my-
thing. It's too vague.
My uncharitable
Yeah,
description of CBT is this. So say you're going to be hosting for the Jimmy Fallon show in a month. You know that you're going to be hosting. You know that you're going to be introducing Johnny Depp and you're going to have a conversation with Johnny Depp. And you have a script and you know what you're going to say. And you know you have to look at the camera and you have to smile and say, "Here's Johnny Depp." And you don't feel that. You don't feel happy. You don't feel like you're going to smile. You feel miserable. And you hate the fact you're going to go on there. But you have to. And everything you think about is awful. You don't want to do it. So what you do every day for a month before you go on the Jimmy Fallon show or whatever the fuck I said, talk show, is you look in the mirror and you look at yourself and you make this fake smile.
Yeah, and you mask.
Here's Johnny Depp.
you
And
mask.
then every day you do it, and every day it looks more convincing, and every day you feel like you're happier every time you do it. And then you go and you do it. And
you put a
underneath
mask on more and more.
yes.
Yes, that's what I keep saying.
Yes. So
You're
I
just putting on a
think.
mask. That's what radical acceptance is. It's just
So I
forming
think.
a
So for
mask so
me,
you can form more.
no, 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 no. I think the opposite. I think that to
So you're saying
be.
take off the mask
So
and
when
be
I did
radically
that,
accepting yourself the opposite way
when I
afterwards.
just looked at the camera and I did that, I couldn't help but having a real smile, because I'm accepting how much I hate doing that, and now I'm able to actually feel joy.
Yeah. Um, confused because I feel like I missed something, or my brain just got confused. It's not necessarily anything you said. I think I just confused myself or missed something in my head.
Living with the horror and with the terror, just accepting it
But
as
I
part
just
of.
think that is just conforming and like putting on a mask.
No,
So that's what radical acceptance seems
no,
like.
I'm saying to, and in order to genuinely feel joy,
And
you
then
just have
just
to live with the terror.
that's different, yeah. Maybe that's just me using a different, maybe seeing the perspective differently the way you're saying it. I would say it's complicated. I don't know. Like it would just we have to talk deeper on it.
Okay.
It's one of those things that would have to be like back and forth more another day or something, so we can both reflect on it.
Another thing that would describe, I was trying to get words to describe how I feel about psychology, and something that, if you are coming at it from this REBT type philosophy, um, and a word I was given to share, I guess, was somatics.
Okay.
And somatics is the she told me that this is like like a not a good thorough the definition, but she said the connection between your physiological state and your emotion is somatics.
Okay, because I'm looking up the definition just to see what it was, and it doesn't seem similar. So I'm assuming
No,
it's more of a psychological term. So it might be like because I'm looking it up just vaguely. But let me see.
I don't know.
It might just be that I have to look up in psychology specifically with like
Not
the definition.
semantics, somatics.
Yeah, I know. Uh, how would it be spelled though? Because it keeps wanting to go to semantics.
SEMATICS. And then two other words I wrote down were vagus nerve and
Yeah,
polyvagal, and I don't know why I wrote
the
those
vagus
down.
nerve. Yeah, the vagus nerve. I've had issues like when I become overly distressed, that my vagus nerve in my body will be in distress, and that will re-trigger my mind to be in distress. So I have to do certain things to make my vagus nerve and my body to calm down. Like you can do some things with your ear that
Hmm.
can cause your body to be more relaxed. So then because your body can force your mind to be more distressed again. You can have like a cycle between your mind and your body, making them both distressed.
Hmm.
So if your cortisol isn't bringing down the distress in your body, then your body will stay in distress, and then you'll have like a cycle of going back in distress. So yeah, the vagus nerve is one way that you can actually affect it and actually help yourself become less distressed.
Yeah, my notes here aren't very helpful. That's all I got.
Yeah,
So
it's just one of the what do you call it? I would say it's very small. Like there's no context to it. So
no,
we just
I
need
was
to
just
be more
given
thorough.
words.
Yeah, yeah. It would just be you have to be more thorough in like a different discussion someday,
Yeah, more
or
complex.
whatever. Yeah, or we just talk about it on the side someday,
Yeah.
whatever it is. But I I think they're still useful, or they are like little like what do you call it? Things to look into, or like little pathways to like go searching.
Freet said absurdism.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's nice
Uh,
talking to you. Make sure you do you I'll want me to share your article in chat right now, and I'll post it in my Discord.
you want, or I can do it like right after. It doesn't matter. It's up to you.
All right. Well, he'll post it in the Discord, and
You
here's
want me to just put it in general?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and
I enjoyed the discussion. I enjoyed the talk.
yeah. Enjoy the talk. All right. Nice talking to you.
Have, yep. Have a good one, man.
You too. that's it for the Smith show. I'm gonna scrape off the smegma. Have a good night.